We set.
Yay!
Now I can do breakout rooms. I'm so excited.
I don't agree. Stop recording. Okay.
Bye.
Let's
okay.
get Nicole back in real quick. I got you.
So let's do this. Let's actually kind of those discussion questions, which whatever. Let's talk about the wedding banquet. It was fun on the chat to watch Lori call the ending cheesy and Martin be like, couldn't finish. I love Jackie was like, I made it to the end and then fell asleep. I was like, what? And then Cash is going, I love that movie. It's a charming movie. Why don't people talk about it? I was like, I know, right? I'm a huge fan. Let's talk about it. General thoughts and then those discussion questions. Member of the not Member of the Wedding. That's a different film. The Wedding Banquet. Go for it, gang. So first,
I will not shut up about it. So I want to hear everyone else's.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan too. What was the first discussion question I posted? I actually carefully thought those questions out. It was, believe it or not, I know they look generic, but I was like,
first one is, did the movie follow the pattern of narrative structure?
Yep. Sorry. Yeah. Let's talk about that. What elements were obvious and what elements weren't? Because it's kind of a strange script. It's a strange film.
Honestly, I thought it fit more to a 5-act movie structure. Because
can you explain that to anyone, and not just in the group, but our viewing audience who watches later, the difference between a 3-act and 5-act, in your opinion?
Well, there's 3 acts and a 3-act. No, well, the main idea is that, like, in each act, there's going to be a rising action, and then there's going to be a point in the act where that's like the climax or like the ending of the act, and it kind of flows into the next act of the next section of the movie of a new conflict or new idea from the entire movie. So the Wedding Banquet, it was kind of interesting to see, like, there was a bunch of little sections in there, and thinking about it, I was writing it down. I wrote down kind of all 5 acts, like the main idea. And yeah, I thought it was more a 5-act structure than a 3-act structure, with the midpoint, low point of a 3-act structure. It didn't kind of correlate. It was more 5-act to me. Which, I mean, I feel like, because Ang Lee is like a Taiwanese filmmaker, and like in that hemisphere, most of the time it's 5-act, right? Isn't it?
I'm honest to God, I'm not even gonna pretend I know Taiwanese film. You know what I mean?
No, like, well, in that hemisphere, like European and Asian, more so than like American filmmaking, because that's more Hollywood structured of 3 acts, whereas like our theater is 4-act, 4 or 5-act, yeah. So I feel like, yeah, they kind of have more leeway of changing the act structure a bit, and I feel like 5 or 4 is like the more commonplace in Europe and Asia, versus our big blockbuster stuff is kind of tied to 3-act structure.
Right. Television operates in 5 acts too. You can literally watch any episode of good television. There's a 5-act structure because of there's just a different sequence of events, right? Like television functions differently. So like the Joseph Campbell wheel, and we'll get to that eventually. The 5-act structure, which has the character flaw, the mistake, the second decision, like television. Yeah, television's more 5-act. Like I said, I've seen foreign films and such, but like I definitely have not seen enough Taiwanese films to be like they function in 5 acts, but yeah, you're 100. I think you're, well, I don't think you're 100% right. Where the American Hollywood 3-act structure is being imitated because that's where money is at, right? So, anyways, yeah, just dropping that there is a 3-act precedent in American cinema. and not every culture or not every filmmaker follows it. Jarmusch doesn't follow 3-act structure. You can watch any Jim Jarmusch movie and you're like, I don't know what the hell is going on here. So anywho, yeah. So okay, so it's in terms of structure, it's different. Not just in terms of 3 and 5-act, but how so? How specific examples of what made it unique as opposed to the Hollywood blockbuster.
Well, the spoilers now for the movie, but there's been like even in the first 10, like 14 minutes, it felt like there was like subversion of what the whole movie was going to be about, when they sent in the
Opera singer?
wife,
Yep.
the opera singer from the application, and I was like, oh, it's going to be like a deceive the opera singer, but no, it was like a real quick thing, and then the tenant gets mad, Wei, and I'm like, how does that add in? But then I was like, okay, well, she was introduced earlier, and then I was like, oh, well, okay, now she's the main character. I didn't read any synopsis or anything, so it just kind of subverted a little of expectations. But I mean, it's made 93, so nowadays movies are kind of like, if it was made now, I'm pretty sure it would be like a goofy, like, oh, let's fake out the opera singer that I'm straight the entire time,
No, that's a good point. That came out in 93, because it sounds weird and like, no, I'm an old man. The 90s were like the golden age of independent cinema, right? That was the last period, truly the last period, where like a filmmaker with a script could go out and Ang Lee and Quentin Tarantino their way into, the system. Does that make sense? Or Richard Linklater. That almost doesn't happen. The only person I can think of who's popped it in terms of little low budget movies and blowing up big is the horror director Eggers.
Yeah, Hereditary and Midsummer.
Well, The Vitch, right?
Oh, okay. Then no, that one.
And Lighthouse, and he literally just kind of took low budget 2-person movies or small cast movies and has turned himself into a major force. But yeah, the 90s, that I know it sounds weird, that happened all the time, right? Kevin Smith and Tarantino and all these, all these filmmakers. What's her name? The director of Gas, Food, Lodging, all that stuff. So, but yeah, I sounds weird, but I kind of miss that, where people could make a movie. People would take chances on little tiny movies like this, and then we end up with Ang Lee and Linklater and all these people. Anywho,
Ari Aster is who I was thinking of. He did Hereditary and Midsummer, and those were horror movies, but like kind of not in line with regular horror genre, which was great.
True. Okay, so there's at least 2, and it's horror. Like horror.
Yeah.
Horror is the genre to break into. Again, we've talked about that. It's, for some reason, horror is always, it has the lowest, it has the highest floor. Does that make sense? Like horror, you could make like the crappiest horror movie and you're still going to get like 100K because people are going to check it out for some reason. People love horror films. Anyways, okay. Other thoughts? Good. Yeah, I agree. The opera singer, she's introduced. She's actually a really interesting character, and she breaks out in a song, and then they just she vanishes.
Well, and then she comes back for the wedding.
She's at the wedding.
Yeah, she's the not maid of honor, but one of the bridesmaids, I think.
Because they're so desperate for guests on short notice that he has to invite the woman, who, by the way, is one of the few people who knows he's gay.
Yeah.
Right? Like, which is kind of funny. She's actually a really cool character. You're like, damn, she's awesome. She comes to his fake wedding knowing all that info.
She, at the beginning too, because I thought it was going to be about her too, because she does say like, oh, I know where you're coming from, because my parents are really adamant about me dating someone but I love this other person or something. She says something along the lines of that.
It's actually really funny because he fills out that form trying to like make an impossible match, and he somehow hits her. You know what I mean? She's got to be an opera singer with a degree in physics 2 degrees, and she somehow shows up. And like, if they had just picked the 6'1", make her 6'1". Oh, she's Chinese, 5'9", and then they found her anyways. No, she's funny. I actually think she's a great character. She should have her own spin-off. There's a 2-degreed opera singer, a tall Chinese woman, like whatever. All right, other thoughts about that? Yeah, structurally. Lori posted on her page about the crazy situation is actually incited by not Wang Tu or whatever, but by the lover. What's his name?
Simon.
Roy Lichtenstein's son, by the way. That's just a weird. I don't know if you guys are familiar with pop, but with contemporary art. Roy Lichtenstein is a super famous painter who did pop art, commercial art, and that's his son. His son plays Simon. Kind of just interesting that Ang Lee found him. It's funny because if you look at his Wikipedia and under personal life, all it says is he is gay. That's it. That's literally, it's like a 5 or 3 letter.
For Simon.
Mitchell Lichtenstein. It's like his dad has like a 70-page Wikipedia, but for Mitchell, it's like he is gay. It's like, oh, that sucks. Anyway. Yeah. Lori pointed that out. Simon is actually the one who triggers the crazy situation, right? So that's an interesting thing. Who's the protagonist of the film?
I go. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, Wei. Okay.
That's who it is. Yeah.
Okay, let's battle royale this. Wei, Wang Tu. Some could argue Simon because he's the carrier of the action, or at least he initiates the right.
The parents.
The parents, yeah. The dad. I love that guy, by the way. Like, one of my all-time favorite scenes is right after the wedding when they're in the hallway and the mom just spontaneously starts crying. And the dad just sits there staring forward the entire time. That scene made me laugh so fucking hard. I had to rewind it. Like, god damn, that's funny as shit. He doesn't even look at his crying wife. He just like stares. God damn, that's funny. I could not stop laughing. It was adorable. Like, that stoic Chinese. Like, anywho, yeah, Wei. Why Wei? Glory, that's an interesting take.
Because when I was going to the quote homework, I guess.
Yeah.
She always came up for each of the, like, the crazy situation and the midpoint and the low point. It was all about centered around her. So I don't. Yeah. So I'm wait a minute. I don't think I forget his name.
Wang Tai?
Yeah. Wei.
Okay.
WAI.
Wait. Okay. Wait. I don't know. Anyway, so every single time it was her situation. So I'm like, maybe he's not the protagonist. I don't know.
No, it is interesting because Simon's the one who initiates the crazy situation when they're in bed, right? Simon's the one who says, let's do this. He comes up with the idea. That's a cute scene too, where he doesn't want to do it until he discovers there's a tax break. And
that's when I mentioned the Adam Sandler movie, the I Now Pronounce You Chuck, and
that movie's so
Larry.
Wildly offensive. Like, that movie's that's a terrible film. Anywho, yeah. Like, nothing but anal. Oh, you're muted.
I think you're muted.
Damn, that looks brilliant too.
There you go.
Oh, I've been talking this whole time. Okay,
I know.
Oh man. I just noticed your mouth
I was
moving right
like, I'm trying to back up Lori here, and I'm like, oh, hey, cool.
Okay,
anyway.
no, let's go back. Backing up Lori.
No. So it's Wei Tung and then Wei is the names. Lori, I think you're right. I think actually, like, talking about Simon and Wei Tung and Wei, I think this is just a super effective script about like splitting what's the word? Protagonist roles for a bunch of different people. Like, there's some movies, like mostly like buddy cop movies, where they'll just like get the two, and then one will have the family life that he needs to repair, and then the other one is like kind of in the backseat for that kind of stuff. But I think this one does a really, I think honestly, a better job than most movies I've seen about like really motivating each character, but letting them take each part of their own like protagonist roles. Like I think you're right totally about like Wei Wei being in every single part of the crazy situation. I want to say this right now just because it's like on my mind and it was the first thing I thought of, like even after I loved the movie. Because there's just quick thoughts about it. Yeah, this movie has a rape in it.
Yeah.
And like
Yep.
Yeah. And like it's one of those
I
things
wanted to talk about that. I was like, we'll get there.
Yeah.
She
Okay,
rapes
cool.
him.
Yeah. I was like, this is a great movie. There's that one scene, but we'll get to it when we get to it. Beyond that, no, I think the protagonist roles kind of like shift around really well. Simon kind of like while he does do a lot of the action for the beginning, he does kind of take a back seat for Wei Tung and Wei Wei as they're trying to get along through their whole thing. Simon kind of jumps in and out when he can, like narratively really well done as well, because he's like going out to go see friends, or he's pretending to be the tenant and all that kind of stuff, or the roommate, a tenant, landlord. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I just think, I don't know. I actually never thought about Wei Wei as much until Lori brought it up. It's a really good point.
Yeah, the low point in particular is, yeah, this is one of those things where like you could legitimately argue there's not multiple low points, but it's like a sequence, not even like one singular event, right? Again, we'll get to that. Yeah, so the crazy situation is instigated by Simon, but he's may or may not be the protagonist. It feels like he is early on, but you're right, he backseats. And then Wei Wei is such a fascinating, like I said, we'll get to the rape, but Wei Wei is a really fascinating character. Because the first time we're introduced, she's straight up trying to seduce him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like she tries to sleep with him.
And I think I'm not trying to like be apologist about this kind of thing. But like just starting off with her character, we kind of see her like she's got this art going on, and the only person she really knows that speaks her language or just can talk to her is Wei Tung, and it's like she's trying to like just do art and come up with the money, but there's no AC, the windows don't open. She's tried for months.
I actually recorded this because I've made notes when I was watching it. I've seen it. This is the second time I've seen it. Well, I've only seen it once before. What's the first image we see of her? It's such a great image. Like it's there's a moment, the little first 3 to 5 seconds we see her. Do you guys recall what she's doing?
Yeah, she's washing herself.
She's washing herself, and she's not showering. She's sitting in a vat of water and sponging herself, right? Which is kind of fascinating. What does that tell us instantly? The first 3 seconds.
She's weird.
She's weird.
That she doesn't have all the amenities.
She's broke.
Yeah.
Like she's taking a hobo shower in her own apartment. And it turns out, yeah, it's not an apartment. It's a fucking warehouse. Like there's she has to sponge bath. She's broke as shit. And so that's kind of a really interesting image where like 3 seconds in, you're like, oh shit. This is someone who's kind of, and then he has a conversation later. He says a line later where he says that's why the rent is so cheap or something. You know what I mean? Like she's living in that piece of shit that he's renting out to her and da-da-da. Anyways, also, why is she broke?
She came in from Taiwan. Is that correct? Did she just like immigrate?
She's not undocumented, but she's. Remember the very first conversation? She couldn't make her rent that month. Why couldn't she make her rent?
She doesn't have a job because no one can speak her language.
Well, she had a job.
Oh.
But maybe she is undocumented. She had a job, but remember she talks about the government came in and kicked out. I can't remember. She mentions her name. They kicked out whatever. She showed up to work, but she didn't get deported because she was late, which is kind of funny. If she had showed up on time, she would have been busted. And remember, she starts crying because they kicked out her friend.
Her only friend.
Her only friend. So yeah. You know what? Now that I run it back, she actually is. She is undocumented. She probably came in on like a student visa and it's expired or something like that. You know what I mean? Like she's overstayed her welcome, and that's why she's essentially hiding out in a warehouse, not paying rent. Any other landlord probably would have evicted her and kicked her out, but he doesn't. Why? Why doesn't he kick her out?
I mean, he feels sorry for her. She tries to pay with like a painting of hers.
Yeah.
And
he rejects the painting, and then she tries to sleep with him, right?
Yeah, well, and then he grabs the painting. He gets the painting after that whole scene where he's like, all right, well, I guess I'll get this as rent.
Right.
So he has a soft spot for her, yeah.
Right. No, I do. I know it sounds weird. Again, we'll get to the rate, but I love Wei Wei as a character. Like she's kind of like she can't cook, which is hysterical. That whole scene where she's like doesn't even drain the rice, and Simon has to like throw. Oh, that's funny as shit. Right in front of the mom. That's like Three Stooges level. Anyways, yeah. So Lori is arguing again that Wei Wei's the protagonist. Anyone think different?
I mean, as far as central protagonists,
or as
I
Cassius
feel
argues, it's a shared protagonism.
Yeah, I would say it's more shared. I mean, because Cass said, each character has their own protagonistic role. Even the parents, the parents their goal is to kind of they want Wei Tung to get married and follow tradition and all that. I guess that they're more antagonistic, but like from a certain point of view, I guess, as the Jedi say, or Obi-Wan says, there's a certain point of view. They have their protagonistic tendencies.
Okay, well, we're there now. Who's the antagonist then?
It's
the mom. Yeah, I think it's the mom.
I think it's the
friend.
I think so.
The friend, the neighbors who look at Simon creepy when he kisses him.
I was gonna say the friend that got them naked in the bed because he's
Bob Law. Bob Law. They called me the Law. I was like, he was this close to Bob Blah. We were super close to Bob Law. Yeah, the guy, we see him on the bridge and he walks angry. Bob Law.
I would kind of argue, as far as antagonists go, I would say the dad.
Interesting. Okay. I was kind of feeling the mom, but
definitely the parents. But I just feel as supportive as he ends up being, he's super selfish and kind of just wants the kid. And like, I don't know.
Interesting. Does he ever actually state he wants the kid?
Yeah, at the end he's like I'm like because he asks like
Simon?
what? Yeah, he's talking to Simon. He's like, well, why did you lie? Like, why do you want to keep the lie going? And he's like lying works out sometimes because at least it gave me my grandkid.
Good. Okay, that's a side. I don't think he ever actually. I think that's one of the brilliant pieces of writing is everyone assumes he's ignorant and wants these things. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's why I think it's the mother. The mother keeps doing all these things on his behalf. I don't think he ever actually states that he wants these things. Does that make sense? In fact, if anything, he's the one. He has two great lines where he tells the mom, "If you keep your mouth shut, you can't put your foot in it." That's a fucking genius line.
That was.
She's the one who she's the one who overreacts to situations. He's the one who's telling her to like, does that It's kind of weird. I honest to God think she uses him as an excuse for her own like agenda. Don't get me wrong. I think you're 100% right. I think he's happy to have a grandchild, right? He is happy, but he didn't push that. At no point does he force that. You know what I mean? Does he make any kind of act towards that? It's a happy side effect for him. You know what I mean? And he's cool with it.
But as Cass said, the dad the mom is like the mouth of Sauron, and
yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Is that like
the dad is kind of enabling her to kind of do his will.
Yeah, it's a I kind of agree with that. That's why I think the parents, like, whereas Simon, Wei Tung, and Wei Wei take like the protagonist roles, I think the parents end up taking a lot of the like antagonist roles, where at least like I don't think I don't think the patriarch of the family is gonna bust out in a monologue in a in a sonnet about why he needs a grandsire or why he needs a grandchild. But like I think definitely like the way I like the way Hector says it, so I'm gonna keep with that. Like, as the mouth of Sauron, like the mom essentially like is trying to keep with these traditional things, and like
the Confucian tradition
yeah.
is the actual term. Like that's
Is
the
it?
term.
Okay.
That's the term Ang Lee used
Hmm.
when he goes. His first 3 films were all about contemporary Chinese, the Taiwanese, but still Chinese tradition, and the breaking of what he calls the Confucian tradition, the traditional Chinese culture and family. In fact, the dad is the only actor to appear in his first 3 films. He's a recurring.
Cool. Nice.
That's his.
I like that guy.
Yeah, me too. I thought he was brilliant in this movie. Like I said, that hallway sequence after the wedding, he doesn't say a single word. He just stares forward, and I could not stop laughing.
I rescind my statement that he's a protagonist then, yeah, because definitely he's Sauron. He's up there.
Make him sound so evil, yeah.
Yeah, you guys are way less sympathetic to the than
I like.
Well, see, that's why I was like protagonist, but
okay, protagonist. Yeah.
Seeing his like that point of view of like, well, he's enabling, because he's understanding everything. He says that himself. He's
the big reveal
everything.
At the end where he understands English and he's just been faking the whole time.
So for him to get what he wants, he's like, I'm not gonna say anything. Haha, this is gonna play into my goal, Not super sinister, but still kind of fucked up. Because he's just fucking over Wei Tung's life. Like, he didn't know. Like, I mean, he understands like as it's going through, but he doesn't know the ending of. He's leaving by the time the group hug of Wei Tung and Simon at the end. He doesn't care about that. He's like, oh, my work here is done. My grandson is born. So he just f's off.
I genuinely think it's. I will say this. I genuinely think it's an interesting moment where he's at the shore with Simon and he reveals that he speaks English. And he says, "You're my son," which is a very sweet moment where he's like, "You're my son. I know. I've known. Da 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 da." But he says exactly what Cassius says, where if I had he let them continue to lie and whatever, right? Because he realizes they're doing all this shit to placate him. So fair enough, right? Does that make sense? Like. But he says something interesting. I would, if it wasn't for you, or if it wasn't for this insanity, whatever, I wouldn't have my grandson, which is interesting because what's going on at the moment he says that?
Oh, they're going to the abortion clinic. Yeah.
He's taking her to an abortion clinic. She ends up not doing it, but he doesn't know that. Does that make sense? Like that's actually a really heartbreaking moment. In the context where he's like, if I had I wouldn't have my grandson. She's on her way to abort the kid because she doesn't even realize that he knows. You know what I mean? Like, it's actually kind of batshit sad and insane. Like,
I read somewhere, it was a comment on like a video of that scene, I think, where they claim that the dad is also homosexual.
Wow.
Because he says something like tradition, something of the whole like tradition thing. I understand.
The Confucian tradition. Yeah.
He understands what's going on. So it's like they claim in this comment was like, oh, well, he's homosexual too, and he only married for tradition and for his line or whatever. So for him to kind of do this whole thing of Wei Tung getting a child was his work of tradition.
Wow.
Flowing through and like the line continuing.
I know. Okay.
So he understood where Wei Tung was, because he at that, like, he's also homosexual. But he's like, oh, I need a grandchild so the line could continue. But after the grandchild was born, you guys could live, how you guys are, like as a couple, because of what he says to Simon, of like saying like, you're my son too and stuff. So yeah, that was a comment, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty interesting.
That's an interesting comment. I think there's some projection in that. It's like people who read Hamlet, and there's this huge contingent that believes that Hamlet is homosexual or something. I was like, there's no evidence to that. Like, there's some projection. There's a lot of projection.
Mm-hmm.
There's zero evidence to me that he's a homosexual, right? Like, it's an interesting take. I mean, if you can look through it, but I mean, I don't know. There's no evidence of that. Does that make sense? The evidence,
Mm-hmm.
like he committed a crime, but you know what I mean? I don't know. That's an interesting take. I don't think it changes the film significantly, but
I'm with you. I don't think it does. I don't think I'm with Austin on this one. I don't know if there's like enough evidence there for it. He's very quiet. He doesn't speak a lot, and that's kind of where like it's interesting to get that patriarch, like, very solemn. Well, he's also a war hero. Let's yeah, like that's the other thing. He's also like a veteran who's like had all these people, and then like this movie gets to feel very lonely at times. It's really interesting. Like, you got Wei Wei with like her friend being deported and not having a job, and then like at a certain point being like, I would say almost
the mom even says Simon has friends. I didn't know he had any.
Yeah.
Like,
Wei Wei at a certain point in this movie just becomes like the singular focus point of like the entire like subject, like everything that's going on, and she doesn't really have a lot of people to go to. Like I don't know how many. Like I can't remember off the top of my head, but I don't think she has anyone that goes to the wedding that she knows. Like, she calls her parents, but like she can't like. I don't remember if she actually says anything about like coming down. I remember they don't come down, but like, yeah, it's wild. Like, this movie has a lot of very like lonely, kind of solemn people in it. It's really.
Is there evidence of the dad showing affection or loving the mother in the movie? Because I don't remember any scenes with that.
I can't recall them ever kissing or showing any kind of.
I'm not saying that go ahead, Cass.
I don't think there's anything. I don't know how to describe this. It's like, I guess for me, this is why I like the movie so much, is that it's very traditional, but in a sense that I don't know the traditions. Right. So it's really interesting to see this. But like, one thing I know, it kind of runs like, it's the theme of all traditions in most families, is that you never really show affection to your partner in front of like people or your kids or things like that. It's a very silent or behind the scenes kind of deal.
Well, because even when they're alone in the garden, they don't really show affection, I think. So not that saying that the father is gay, but I feel like he married for duty instead of love. Same thing with like how the opera singer was saying at the beginning, of saying like, oh, my parents want to arrange this whole thing. I love this other person, but like that whole thing, Wei Tung is the like arranged marriage application thing. Him understanding his son and saying, when he's talking to Simon, he says something about tradition and stuff. So I feel like not he possibly didn't want to marry his wife, but he did it for duty and for the whole, his ascension or something, yeah, like so I feel like he has that similarity to Wei Tung's thing, because it was in question 2 of like or question 3 of our discussion questions, where I noticed like what didn't work for me, and we'll talk about that, is that like Wei Tung is very flat. Like, it's supposed to, his father's very stoic, but like, and you see that in Wei Tung, but it didn't really work for me in Wei Tung. But I feel like that was the intent of like showing their similarities. And yeah, I guess like duty, because he's just kind of going through the motions in the wedding, and the dad is kind of saying, and in that conversation with Simon, like, oh yeah, tradition is up here. That's what we value, and that's what I want my grandson to be. And basically saying, like, in my head, I'm like, oh well, he didn't love the wife; he just married her for duty.
Interesting.
Yeah. Sorry, I saw you, Nicole. Did you have something to say earlier?
Yeah, I was gonna say that, like, well, when they're in the car with Simon in the back seat, he does, the father does kind of put his hand on her, like, around her head, and he's like touching the part of her head after she gives him his pill.
Oh shit.
So I kind of looked at that as some form of affection, because you see Simon looking through in the rearview mirror, looking at them as well.
That is true.
I'm glad you brought that point up, because that's something I wanted to, I guess, piggyback on. Is that's the thing, is Simon and Wei Tung are super affectionate to each other and super, like, they're manhandling each other. It's really fucking cute and it's my favorite thing in the world. But like, like there's, and not conservative in the political sense, but just conservative in the way that they like show affection, and the parents kind of just don't really. They have like these small things, like
when he comes back from the walk and she, without saying a single word, hands him an orange juice and his pill. Yeah.
She, like, there's these, like, it's one of those, after years of just kind of doing everything, they kind of stop, the puppy love gets away, and it just becomes like this, you're my friend and I know what you have to do and you know what I have to do, and like it's hard to describe, to just be like,
in other words, duty.
But duty, but like the way duty implies is that, like, I would rather not have to do this.
I just keep thinking now, sorry, I keep thinking of Wreck-It Ralph, when Wreck-It Ralph is like, I found it in Hero's Duty, and the girl's like, duty, you know, they're like, duty, you know, like, why did they flush the toilet? Because it was the hero's duty, you know, like, whatever. Sorry.
No, I don't think it's a duty thing. I think it's definitely, like, I don't know. I've been with Liz for like 8 years now. I've been with my partner for like 8 years now, and like, we're not like we're super lovey-dovey, but like, it's not all the time. And there are just moments of just these soft little, like, she'll do one thing and it seems so minute, but like, it's just those like tiny acts of love. And like, from what I've seen, especially from my grandparents growing up, they never really showed a lot of affection in front of us. They're very like, oh, we can't really show it, but like, they would do these small things here and there. Duty, I think, saying like duty, like, implies that while they didn't want to do it, they have to. But I think they both genuinely like being in each other's company. Like, it's nice that they can get away to go shopping or do whatever, but like, I think
why doesn't he go shopping? That's a funny line too.
Oh, I forgot what it was.
They're manhandling each other up the stairs, and he happens to be at the home, and Simon's putting his belt back on, and he goes, I thought, and Wei Tung's like, I thought you went shopping, and he says why he didn't go. Do you remember?
I forgot what he says.
Because that's
like, it's a woman's thing or something.
Woman's thing.
Oh.
He's just sitting there on a chair, like falling asleep. Oh, you know, that's a woman's thing. You're like, yeah, he's so. So you brought that up earlier. He's a war hero. When did we discover that?
At the dinner,
at the restaurant. No
restaurant.
Yeah, when one of his old war buddies is like, hey, is this you? And you're like, oh, it's like, and then they talk quite a bit about it. Right. I don't know if I think it gets mentioned slightly in the beginning. I can't remember. I remember thinking like there was a slight hint at it, but then like seeing
he doesn't push that.
Yeah, no.
Like, at no point is he like, I'm a, you know, which again is really good writing, I think, where traditional, like, the war, if you had a war hero dad, he'd come in like, back when I was fighting, you know, whatever. He doesn't push that. The first time we really discover he's somebody, you know what I mean? He's not just Wei Tong's father, but he's a big figure.
And in that whole conversation, he's kind of saying like, and the other guy's like, no, I'm going to give you honor. But he's like, I don't deserve it. You know, don't bother yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What was I going to say? Yeah, it's super interesting because I want to ask like who this movie is almost for, because like, while I think like a Chinese audience may like it because of how much almost fish out of water being in America and how different the culture is. But like I'm definitely not the audience, if that makes sense. This is why I like the movie so much more, is because it's like,
yeah, I like you're like, it spoke to me, but I'm not the audience.
Yeah, that's something I really like, because this doesn't seem like a movie for that, because there's like, and it's a theme in Ang Lee's like,
body of work.
Body of work, is that there's a lot of queer characters in there, especially gay characters, and it's so refreshing to see, especially like in a 1993 movie. And it's like, well, we could have had a marriage thing, like it could have been just another girl, and it could have been anything else, but it's a gay relationship. And then it's like dealing with the Confucian traditional ism in like, and I don't know how to describe it, just the two different worlds colliding, but in a very specific way with very specific characters. It I don't know how to describe it. It just feels so hyper focused that it's not hyper focused, but it's like I feel like it's more of like a Chinese American audience than it is like mostly American, if that makes sense. Like, which is, again, I just like movies that aren't targeted towards me, because I really like stuff like this.
I will say this again, like that film, because essentially Waco, my professor, who's Taiwanese, right? Waco's again an amazing human being. He's Taiwanese. His mother died when he was like 11. She died of like cancer, which he talks about it constantly. Like anytime Waco writes, it's like, so anywho, but one of the reasons, like it's in the opening thing where the films that we constantly discuss, like Rain Man or Back to the Future or whatever, it was made very clear in the lesson plan, which essentially I just hijacked. It is Waco goes, we're going to be studying films that either were nominated for an Academy Award or huge blockbuster successes. This was a huge film, not in America, but in China. You know, in America, it was like a little, like it is an indie movie. It was well received by critics. This made a ton of money in China. It was a huge blockbuster in China, which of course is like the second biggest market, right? Like there's whole, I'm sure you guys have read articles. There's whole scenes where films now are made thinking about the Chinese audience, you know, and not offending the Chinese, like Mulan and all that stuff.
So that's super funny though, because like they take out a kiss between two women in the Star Wars movie, The Rise of Skywalker.
Well, they took out a bunch of scenes in especially Disney movies for that kind of stuff. Go ahead, Nicole.
No, I was just agreeing with, yeah, they took, even though the kiss, well, I think that kiss in the Rise of Skywalker was literally in the background, and you could easily miss it as well.
So I'm super surprised that this was big in China.
But there's
this in 1993, no less, you know?
Mm-hmm. No, fair enough. And yeah, maybe the culture or whatever the Chinese government has altered over the last 30 something years or something, you know, or it could just be people are so afraid of offending whatever Chinese sensibilities, and this movie just snuck through and was maybe because they didn't edit, it was huge. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That's a fair enough.
The advertisement for this movie must have been a lot different.
Right.
Sorry, you're cutting off just a bit for me. One more time, Nicole. Or is she frozen?
I'm guessing they probably advertised this movie. Oh,
hey, you good now.
Okay. I'd say they probably advertised this movie a lot different in China as well, to not put the emphasis on the fact that it's about like a gay couple as well. Because that could have been to try to get people in to see the movie as well.
Yeah, I'm just surprised that it was big in China. I would assume that it was more for American audiences, since it was like a New York. It feels like a New York story, you know, like
Ang Lee's from New York, right? He is from New York. He's Taiwanese by birth, but he's a New Yorker. He went to NYU film school and all that stuff. Like I said, he made his first movie at 40 because his wife was a medical doctor and he was a house husband. And then he decided at 40, like, hey, you know that degree I got? I should start doing it. So yeah, he's a late life filmmaker. And he's good at it. It's like, oh shit. But yeah, I always thought it was kind of funny. He married a doctor and he took his quote useless film degree and raised the kids and then decided to start making movies. Now he's Ang Lee. Whatever. But yeah, like that's something I don't want to get too wrapped up because like this is why I wish Waco was here because he's whatever into that culture. It's a Taiwanese film, right? Which is we don't want to get into the whole politics of China and Taiwan or whatever. It's a Taiwanese film, which he probably couldn't have made this with Chinese funding, but he could make it with Taiwanese funding. And then it snuck its way into the Chinese market, you know? Yeah. That's interesting. All right. I do want to get us back. So the crazy situation is Simon, right? We can recognize that, right? Simon pushing the fake marriage. So what's the midpoint? Right? What are we looking for when we talk about midpoint?
Like lowest point in the character's journey?
No,
like,
that's the low point and midpoint.
Oh,
are
got it. Okay.
The full steam is essentially right. The midpoint's the full steam where now we're in it. Now there's no turning back. What's the midpoint?
When the
would it be the wedding
down?
at City Hall?
I think it's the wedding.
Yeah.
You can't go back now. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like,
See, because I have a 5-act structure, but the end. So it was 17 minutes. The crazy situation, the exciting factor is incident is the Simon thing. And
I think that's the one. I will say this. I think the crazy situation is the most recognizable. Like you can mark it. You could like there it is, right? Everything after that gets a little muddied.
And so 17 minutes, and the question was end of Act 1, which is the parents coming in. That would be the end of Act 1, I feel. And then the midpoint would be the ceremony at City Hall. That would be the midpoint. Low point.
Great scene. But she can't speak. Dude, that made me laugh so hard. To have it hold till death do us part. I die. She's just like, you know, like, and the guy just doesn't give a shit, man.
He's like, yeah, sure, okay.
And they put the wedding ring on his forefinger. They're so.
Yeah.
You know.
Like, just get it over with. Okay.
God damn, that's funny.
And then like he fakes the kiss, kind of like.
And the mom just starts breaking down in the hallway. She just just starts crying. Like I said, the dad's stoic. It's funny as shit. I love that hallway sequence. Yeah. I think it's the midpoint. Once they do the wedding, there's no going back. You know what I mean? Like they're in it now. It's again, as you pointed out, in a 5-act structure. When we talk about television has a slightly different format. Where television is usually the characters in pursuit of something, and then when they run into an obstacle, they either back down or they double down on their bad decision. And they double down hard on their bad decision. They go through with the wedding, right? And they think they're out of it. They get their shitty courtroom wedding. The parents will go back home. And then all that happens is what complicates it further.
The wedding dinner scene where the guy who did the military.
Yep, random dude meets the father. You know what I mean?
The Deus Ex restaurant. He's like, oh, I'm gonna throw you a wedding banquet in my restaurant.
Right.
So that kind of full steam ahead at end of Act 2, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be?
So yeah, that's it. So it's it's one of the things where I said like it's a little muddy, and you could argue there's no seminal singular points, but almost like sequences where okay, is the midpoint the actual wedding in the courthouse, or is it where the restaurateur recognizes the father and decides to throw the banquet? I mean, it's the title of the fucking movie. You know what I mean? Like the banquet, the decision to throw the banquet is what really triggers everything. That's what causes the parents to stay. You know, they might have just hopped back on a plane back to China if it hadn't been for the goddamn wedding banquet, which is another whole thing. That sequence is bonkers too. Bob Law and the little baby. That's a cute scene where the baby kisses her on the cheek, and yeah.
All the little traditional things that they did, like I didn't understand I think it was like 2 oranges or tangerines or something on the bed, and the baby jumps on the bed and grabs like the wedding bed and grabs the orange. And I think that's something.
I don't think there was oranges. I think it was just, I don't know if I guess I didn't see the oranges, but it's just one of those things where it's like, if you want a healthy, bouncy baby boy, you put him on the bed that you're going to like do it in. It's one of those weird things. I don't want to call it weird because that seems super disrespectful, but it's like Americans and everyone's have had their weird traditional I remember a teacher of mine told me like years ago how like I think in some European like long ago during like the time of kings or whatever, they would grab the husband and the wife and then like take them to their room.
The
and
bedding.
then yeah, and then everyone would wait outside until it happened,
so they
and
could
then
consummate the marriage.
yeah, and then what they would have to do, and then what they would do is like when it was done, they would show the sheet with like the unfortunate like I don't
The
know how to describe it
ejaculate?
nicely.
Yeah,
No,
yeah, yeah.
no, with blood from the hymen.
Oh.
Oh,
I like how you guys don't.
oh no, yeah.
No, so that's what that's why the virginity thing was so important, because and then they would show it, and that's weird to us, but like there's like little traditions that everyone does. Like if you go to like someone, we do like baby showers, we do gender reveals, we do all this different stuff, and we think, and most of us think it's like, hey, it's whatever, right? But like that's our culture. That's again why I like this movie so much, is because it's so steeped in a different culture that's not mine. I'm like, oh, I get it. Like cool. Like it's one of those things.
Or like the carrying of the bride across the threshold,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
know, there's that
Mhm.
you have to pick up the bride and carry her through the door.
Yeah.
That's such an American shit.
There's the jumping of the broom. There's like a million
Mhm.
different things, and it's like from an outside perspective of a culture that you're not familiar with, that looks like, why would they ever do that? Why are you jumping over a broom? But it's like, oh, it has an actual reasoning to it, which again, this movie just has so, and that's the thing. This movie Confucius like traditionalism. That's why I like it so much. Is that it's like so steeped in traditionalism, and like Wei Tung and like Simon are just not into it. They're like, I just want to go back to my gay lifestyle of like being hot and like being a New Yorker.
Playing
and, like,
basketball. Hey, like I like they had that one gay friend on the bike early
mhm.
who never appears again. He's not even at the wedding. He's like, "Do you want to play b-ball later?" And
Oh,
he
yeah.
kisses him on the cheek and like drives, rides away.
Not in front of the neighbors. Yeah.
Creeps out the neighbors. The neighbors are like, "Oh, look at those gays." It's
But
pretty.
like that's what I like about all that stuff. Like the red, the red envelope thing is always like, that's how you give gifts, is that usually put like a little bit of money. But the thing about the father is that he keeps giving people all these like massive amounts of cash to like help them, and
$30,000.
yeah, and like he gives Simon a bunch of money, he gives Wei a bunch of money, he gives it's good, it's really good. That's why I like this movie so much, is because it does it's a clash of worlds between the traditionalism and the like more progressivism that is like America as in the 90s, I guess. That can be debated as of now, but that's kind of the worlds that are clashing in this movie, and I think they do such a great job of like making those two clash. Like a lot of other movies have tried to do that, and it's just like,
I will say this because I wanted to bring this up. This is an interesting movie because it happens to me. This is the way it feels. It's a film that happens to be about a homosexual couple, but I know this sounds terrible, but it doesn't feel like it's forced. Does that make
yes,
sense? Like there's not
yes.
a quote like gay agenda or some shit like that. You know what I mean? It's just a narrative about a gay couple and and what they have to, the hoops. I know that sounds terrible, but you know what I mean, right? They're like, you watch the movies, they're like, I get it. Like they're just pounding the concept.
I end up following a lot of like queer like news, whatever stuff, media stuff. And they always talk about like, oh, here are the best relationships in movies. Here's the whatever. It's a lot of queer baiting, a lot of just like, watch this terrible movie for like these 2 seconds of people. But Simon and Wei Tung have a really good relationship, you know. They like, Simon isn't like, well, like Simon isn't outright like, well, if you try to go for a woman, you're not going to get me. He's outright the person to say, hey, I've got an idea. From my American sitcoms, I have an idea. And he's like, I have this idea, and like, I'll play along, I promise. And they, and like, I'll like they try to make calls to each other when they can.
That's a sweet scene.
when they had
stay on the
it's
phone,
so
where they stay on the phone with
it's
each
so
other.
nice. And then what's it called? Like that scene where they're about to do it and like he's taking each other's clothes off and they're making out, they're wrestling up their stairs. That's adorable. And like
I
and
also
even
love
yeah,
there's one little scene of Simon at the beginning. His introduction is him doing his physical therapy thing.
I was gonna bring that scene up.
Yeah, he says like a proverb in Chinese, and but that's cute because it's like you're not doing it in front of Wei Tung. It's like he brings it to his space, you know, and I love that.
And I guess that's what I want. My main point about like talking about the queer media stuff. I've never heard of this movie, at least from anything. I haven't heard of this movie since Austin brought it up, or since we watched it. And like it, because it just, that's what blows my mind about it. Why no one's talking about it is because the relationship is so sincere and genuine. And like, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the movie that may not like be the palette for everybody, but like, I think for the most part, the way this movie works out, like the relationships are pretty rock solid from like at the beginning and definitely at the end. Like despite what Wei Wei does, it's like she's still a genuinely sympathetic character at the end as she was at the beginning. Like that's always treated as such a, and justifiably so, it's usually treated as a heinous, monstrous act, and a lot of people try to make it out to be like this awful scene. But in this one, like it happens, and then like I don't know how to describe it. It's like Wei Wei doesn't turn out to be a monster for it because of it, and it's like, okay, well, now we're kind of living in the bed we lied. Like I guess we'll get to when we get to the low point, but that's sort of what like.
Yep. And we're gonna get there. I do want to bring up, I absolutely love the scene that Hector brought up where we see Simon and he's got the patient and he says there's an ancient Chinese proverb and he's completely fluent in Chinese. Right? Like clearly he learned it as a result of Wei Tong or whatever. He's like, oh, if you don't do this, then your physical therapist will murder you. Da, da, da. But when the parents come in and he gives her the gift, which I he's stumbling and he goes, it's skin cream for old people who are wrinkly. and he's just like slightly insulting her. Like, dude, that made me laugh so fucking hard. He's like, I hope you like gift, especially because I watched it with the subtitles on and the ellipses. Like, it's for people who are old to remove, and she's just whatever. He has to fake not knowing Chinese on their behalf, because otherwise that might give it away, which is clever. Like, that's funny. Where we see him actually legitimately fucking with the mother in front of Wei Tong, and you just see him like, God damn it, which I think was really cute. He's a bit of an agitator, a little bit of an agitator, which I think is adorable. Okay, I will say this too about Simon. Like, you can see his enthusiasm wane as it gets further and further out of hand. It was his idea, but the farther along it goes, her cooking, every time she's in the kitchen, that's a recurring gag. Like she can't even cook eggs. And they're just like, God damn it. We're gonna have to fake it. He's actually secretly cooking on her behalf, whatever. Like, it's funny.
The dad says it's better than his wife's cooking.
Yes, like, good stuff. Low point. What is the low point in your guys' opinion?
So I think you talked about it earlier about it being the sequences, but because man, it's quite a bit too. I'm really trying to think. I wanted to say it was like finding out about the pregnancy, roughly, like because I wouldn't really distill it till the night that like Wei Wei raped Wei Tung, but like I think the consequences of that, if that makes sense, like I think the night that it happened, like the wedding night, is essentially what is the cause that the effect is the pregnancy, which is, I think the pregnancy is what the low point is.
Simon also getting mad.
Yeah.
And storming off.
Which I think is interesting because even like Wei Tung is like, it was your idea, and it's like, and it was totally Simon's idea, and like his American sitcoms. I'm bringing that up because it just feels very sitcom-y, but it's just like, he didn't mean for it to get this far out of hand.
It's the Mean Girls moment where it's like, oh, you're plastic, you're totally you're assimilated into this.
Or yeah, Gangs of New York when DiCaprio says it's warmest underneath the dragon's wing. You know what I mean? Like,
I love how I bring up Mean Girls and you bring up Gangs of New
no,
York.
because
That's
it's
funny.
the same premise. It's executed in different genres by different filmmakers, but it's the idea like, oh, I'm gonna infiltrate or I'm gonna execute this plan, and then you get too deep, right? And then to the where you're no longer in control of your own situation. Right? Like that's kind of it. It's funny, Regina George and the Butcher is like side by side, the plastics and the whatever. Daniel Day-Lewis and Rachel McAdams are the same fundamental character.
Yeah, Lori, I was gonna say, I was reading your thing.
I thought it was like when she decides to have an abortion and then everybody kind of freaks out over it. So.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's go for it.
I was just gonna say, I think you're definitely. And it's so interesting because the parents, I guess, before the abortion, the parents are super excited about the birth or the whole thing, and then yeah, it's such a solemn moment when like she's like, I set up an appointment at 2:30 or whatever, and like for the meeting, and it's like, oh man, like
He
that's
cries.
Mm-hmm.
He cries. Wei Tung cries. You know what I mean? Like he legitimately cries, which is an interesting moment. A thing he never wanted or planned or expected, and as we talked about, like a byproduct of essentially what is a rape. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But he cries. Like, yeah, it's a weird. I don't know. Weird makes it sound like it's kooky or some shit. It's a genuinely like I don't even want to say bizarre. It's a genuinely odd moment though. It's like you didn't see it coming, but the way it impacts people, you know. So yeah, so the abortion is essentially what we all kind of figure is the low point or something. Simon, or is it even the pregnancy? Because Simon announces he's moving out, right? Once the parents leave.
I'm still with you on the idea that it's more of a sequence of things because it's like I think it's Simon moving out. I think this is where the protagonist role kind of shifts to Wei Wei and Wei Tung of just kind of being like, well, like, damn, here we are in this bed together, and it's like it's the last place we want to be right now. That's me projecting, whatever. But yeah, I think it's Simon leaving and then like them deciding for the abortion. I think it's that just sequence. I don't know if I can really like
a specific, yeah.
Yeah, that's me. Like if you guys have your specific points, that's cool. For me, it just feels like
there's a three-step low point or something like that. Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I don't think there's a singular moment. I think it's the like it happens so quick. There's the stroke, right? There's the fight.
Oh, that's right, the stroke. How did I forget about the stroke?
Followed by
there's
the stroke, followed by the revelation to his mother. Right, he comes out to his mother in the hallway, followed by the abortion announcement. There's like 4 things in like an 8-minute span or 10-minute span. We're like, God damn, like everything fell apart really, really quickly.
Yeah, that's what I put in Act 4. Is what I put. My 5-act thing is the first act is meet them, the 3 main characters. Act 2 is the parents coming, the city hall wedding, and the dinner at the Chinese restaurant. Act 3 is the Chinese wedding banquet. Act 4 is all the low points after that, and then Act 5 is the dad knowing or talking to Simon and them not getting the abortion. That's what I kind of sectioned off into that 5-act structure, because everything has like a lot of rising and falling actions in each section. So I thought that was interesting. So yeah, I mean, like it from the first question, 3-act structure, I could argue that it might be a 5-act thing. But yeah, definitely that all those 3 low points, I feel like they kind of happened to the two protagonists, Wei and Wei Tong and Wei Wei.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you guys. In terms of the structure, you can kind of feel all the elements that we're talking about. I think the delivery mechanism is unique and different. You know what I mean? That's kind of what makes Ang Lee special. Is he gets there, but he doesn't get there by obvious routes, which is kind of cool, which is the goal, right? To be unique. Because we now, especially, I imagine you guys, everyone fundamentally knows this, but now that you guys can name the elements and know the exact period in a film they're supposed to appear, like, oh, this is the crazy situation, this is the low point. Like, you can watch movies and just be like, ugh, here it comes, and then it's so obvious that they're not exciting. You know what I mean? Which is interesting. Like, you want to hit these cornerstones, but you want to do them in a way that's engaging and unique. And I think Ang Lee does it in this film in particular. The Coen brothers are always really good about it. Like, it hits and you're like, oh shit, they hit it. But they did it in an exciting and fashion. Does that make sense? You want to do it, like, you want to make the burger, but you don't want it to be routine, right? You want the burger to be special.
Yeah, I thought this was going to go Chasing Amy route of Wei Tong kind of being into Wei Wei and then culminating in the wedding bed
that would have sucked.
Scene. Yeah, so I thought that was going to go that route, and I was like, oh, I'm glad it didn't. But that's where my head was at, where I was like, I'm thinking this is kind of Chasing Amy-ish, or like with a reluctant love or something,
Chasing Amy is actually the one Kevin Smith film that I actually really enjoy that film.
No, I like it a lot. But I thought this movie was gonna go that route where Wei Tong and Wei Wei kind of fall in love or like have that love moment.
Right. Yeah. Well, they secretly. Okay, cool. So we've addressed the elements in question 1 and question 2. Let's get to question 2 in our discussion. Which is what was question 2?
Which element in the movie did you feel was the most effective and why?
Yeah. Cassius already talked about the representation of a queer couple that doesn't feel that doesn't feel, I know it sounds terrible, but doesn't feel like an agenda, like it's going out of its way. It just happens. Like, I know it sounds weird. I think that's what makes it such a great piece of writing, is cis heterosexual cinema, whatever, that culture is, it's never, I know it sounds weird, it's never like forced. It's a natural progression of those characters. I think this film does that. And God, I can't believe I'm saying this, but there is a lot of quote queer cinema where you watch it, you're like, God, we get it. You're really like the whole point is like, look at this gay couple, look at this gay couple, look at this gay couple, right? Which is not a film. Does that make sense? It's just not. In my opinion. Oh, God. Maybe I should.
I understand what you're saying.
This recording, because I'll get canceled out of my fucking mind for whatever.
No, the intent
I mean? Like,
is there. Yeah, the intent is there, but like the execution isn't. It feels more like a agenda pushing kind of, which that seems terrible to say, but this feels more like natural. Like there was no agenda of any sort. It's just more like a love story or like this wacky story involving two sets of people
involving a rape. It's the wackiest rape movie.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of elements for me in this one. It's just especially like definitely the crew relationship. I super love that. But like, again, I kept going on about the traditional thing because it's something I've never experienced. So it was really nice. And it's got a great clash with like what American traditionalism can be and then what like or progressivism and like Chinese traditionalism. Confucius, I guess I should use that word, Confucian traditionalism. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of this movie I just love altogether, but those things really popped out for me. I don't know if there's anyone else who's got one. I'll probably piggyback on that too.
I have like 2 paragraphs, but I'll share that later. I could want to hear everybody else's thoughts.
Lori, I'm interested. You wrote your whole thing. What worked? And I like it. Okay, you said we'll get to it. What didn't work? We'll get to the cheesy ending as you described it. But what worked for you, or if anything, you know?
I like the dad, honestly.
Me
I
too.
think
I
that
fucking love the father.
I just love that, like, he's so like he's not necessarily like being over dramatic when he's pretending to not know anything. It's just kind of like a quiet observer. So I like that about him. And I also liked that, like, even though like he was okay with Simon and his son being together. So that was very sweet. And like he was actually like he's part of the family now, so here's some money. So I actually just liked that part.
Yeah, I agree. I love the father. I love the actor. I love his performance. Seriously, I'm like almost tempted at the end of the meeting to go rewatch the movie just so that hallway scene after the courtroom wedding where the mom breaks down and I swear to God, and he just stares forward. I could not stop laughing. That was so goddamn funny to me.
And I liked all his walks he goes on.
He's so no, I agree too. I love the father because Ang Lee talks about it. Cassius keeps bringing it up. This concept of Confucian tradition, he's the physical representation of that, and it turns out he's not that at the end, right? Everyone walks on eggshells around the guy, and he's not, like I said, at no point does he explicitly state he wants a grandson. At no point does he push. In fact, he tells the wife to shut up when she's kind of being melodramatic and like it's really weird. He's the physical manifestation of the so-called Confucian tradition, but at no point does he push it. Like, does he actually push it? People just assume that he would be that way. Does that people just assume that he would be that way because he's an old Chinese male, right? And it turns out he might actually be one of the most progressive and thoughtful and sympathetic characters in the entire film. Which honestly is not and can't be. There's no way that's not intentional by Ang Lee. You know what I mean? That he would be. You guys see what I'm getting at, right? That he would be he's carrying all the markers of like old Chinese homophobia, whatever, and he doesn't. He doesn't.
Going back to what you said in the beginning, the Bobby or the King of the Hill thing.
His taste in music
Hank
has improved. Yeah, no, I agree. Hank Hill's a great character. What is he? He's a white beer drinking male, but he turns out he's actually a really thoughtful, sweet guy who loves his son and doesn't care. You know what I mean? That's a whole nother discussion about whether
Regina George, the butcher, Wei Tung's dad, and Hank Hill. A lot of parallels.
Yeah, right. Yeah, in fact, if there was a King of the Hill episode where those 4 characters were drinking beer in an alley, I would watch it. Yep. They're drinking Alamo beer together. No, yeah, I agree. The dad is I also personally, one of the elements that I love, like I said, is Mitchell's, like I said, his posturing. You know what I mean? I think is really funny in the beginning until it gets out of hand and then he doesn't want a part of it anymore. And Simon, sorry, Mitchell Lichtenstein's the actor. Simon, sorry. And the actual wedding banquet is just fascinating to me. Like the clash of cultures and blah blah. And when there's a knock at the door and room service and Wei Tung's like, don't answer, and then they storm in with the dominoes and like
I want to say something about
everything about the wedding banquet is just batshit crazy. It's like a whole 20-minute sequence of chaos.
When I first got my apartment, I got my first apartment. Sorry, it's my dog in the background. One sec. When I first got my apartment, I was just kind of hanging out. My family came into town. my drinking uncle came into town, and once he gets into town, everyone kind of gets crazy. And I was like, all right, my family's in town. I'm gonna have like a sleepover with my friends, whatever. It'll be fun. And then I was just kind of minding my own business. For some reason, I slept early that night, and my friends were in the living room. And I get woken up and like, hey, there's someone at your door. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I start hearing tapping at the window, like ting, 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 ting. I'm like, what the hell's going on? And then like they're asking for you, and I'm like, why are they asking for? Who knows that I'm here? My family, like one of my uncles knew, and I knew that he would tell my drinking uncle, and I was like, oh,
That's funny.
fuck. So I open the door, and they're like, hey, they have like beer and wine and all this other stuff, and they're like, we just got back from the club, like whatever, like we just got back from the bar, and my friends are freaking out, and I'm like, listen, you guys, if you guys want to go, just go ahead and go. Like I'm just gonna stuff you in my room if not, but like I got to deal with this, and then like.
Yeah.
For the next 2 hours, they're like, here, drink some, like, here, drink something. And I'm like tired and half asleep. And I'm like trying to drink wine. I'm like, hey, cool. So I hardcore relate to that scene when I was like, he's like, don't answer the door. And then like everybody shoots in. I was like, oh, that's an awful feeling.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah, I again, like I love the way Bob is drunk, and yeah, the where they have to kiss, and I think he kisses her on the cheek or something, like, and the crowd, like, come on, put some heart into it, like, da, 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 da. Yeah, they're very. I mean, that sequence exists to literally indicate that everything is getting out of hand, and that's why it's chaotic. And the rest of the film is about dealing with the aftermath of the goddamn wedding banquet, right? Their plan would have worked. Like the parents would have gone back to China. It would have worked, except that goddamn restaurant owner recognized the father. You know,
Simon incited the incident. Simon
takes
paid
him out to
and went
dinner
to the restaurant. Yeah.
Yep. They had gone to a McDonald's. It's a totally different movie.
Damn
Oh
Simon.
God, that would have been so awful taking your parents after your wedding to a McDonald's. How awful.
Yeah, like the banquet is what gets out of hand. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the bank. There was the funny little dialogue with the cook. Remember where the cook is like arranging something ornate, and the guy's like,
it's like
"Hurry
a
up!"
swan.
Yeah. He's like, "How much? You gotta hurry up!" And he goes, "Who's talking?" The friend of the father. I got 40 minutes. It's like, he's not gonna stress. Like, that's a cute line too. It's funny. Like you said, Ang Lee has a really good sense of humor. He's a good writer. Okay, that worked for me. Nicole, any specific element that worked for you?
Or Elvira.
Which might be a
Or
little bit.
Vita?
Oh, Nicole there.
I haven't watched it, so I'm very curious now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a good film. Sorry we're spoiling some stuff, but yeah. Oof.
It's okay. I'll forget everything you guys said.
Oh yeah. Well, we're gonna talk about the rape soon, because that's a thing. But yeah. Nicole.
I was gonna say that was like the main thing that bumped me. That scene, that was the main thing that bumped me. As well with this, because it was kind of hard to. At times after that, I forgot about it, but then I remember it every time they would talk about the whole situation, about the baby and everything. I was like, yeah, it's basically assault.
Yeah,
like, regardless of the fact that they're both drunk or whatever, it's still like assault.
It's
and
we'll get to that in a bit, but yeah, I will say this: male rape was a source of comedy. It is still, actually. I mean, we're moving past it, but how many like drop the soap jokes have you seen in shitty film or television? Don't drop the soap. It's like, is anal rape in prison like a funny thing? I don't get why this is a common trope. Like, it's, don't drop the soap. You're like, okay, whatever. But we'll get to the rape, because she does rape him. I mean, she does. There's no ifs, ands, or he doesn't want to. He rejects her. He's drunk. She takes advantage. Blah blah blah. Anyways, we'll get to that. But what did work?
What
were you, if anything?
I mean, I would say one thing. I will say that I heavily expected the climax to be the wedding banquet. I was not really expecting like a whole other kind of portion afterwards, because usually when it comes to movies like this, the climax comes at these sort of like
The
events,
coming
something,
together,
or
the
something
coupling.
sort of like that, like
Right.
where it's like a big spectacle of some sort.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point. The film is actually about the aftermath of the wedding banquet, right? The wedding banquet is what fucks everything up. At least for them, like it complicates things. The goddamn wedding banquet is what triggers the rest of the film. That's a good point. Yeah. It's the title of the movie. So you're like, oh, there's gonna be a wedding banquet. Okay. Then it's not the climax, it's the middle, right? It's the midpoint. Okay. All right, and then the question 3.
Well, I
Oh, go
have
for it. Your
yeah, I
2
have like 2
paragraphs.
paragraphs. So I wrote I love the use of photography. So and art when Wei
I saw that.
Tung.
I saw that video essay too.
Yeah. So I mean, like, because that was pretty crazy. Like I was noticing it too, and I was like, something's got to give, because I noticed the framing, and I noticed the albums, because the mother she's like alone, and she's like looking through albums, and then Wei Wei kind of goes in and says, hey, why are you alone? She's like, oh, I'm looking through albums. And then at the end they kind of come together and look at the wedding album. So I thought that was really cool. What's it called? The what else do I have here? The art is pretty big too. I like the part where she Wei Wei tries to pay rent with art, and then it comes back when they kind of switch the photos around, and they have the dad's poems, the poetry art on the walls, and she's kind of mentioning that to him, like, oh yeah, this is cool. So there's like a little interesting little tidbit there of like familiarity with the dad and the Wei Wei, you know.
No, I'm gonna interrupt. I love that sequence where she can't cook, she can't whatever, if the mother actually discovered how quote useless she is, she would reject her. But she walks in, and because she's a painter and an art major, whatever, she recognizes the dads and then gives that speech about why it's beautiful, and she like instantly wins him over. Like it took her like 30 seconds to win him over. That's pretty funny. Like, yeah.
And I think something that's important to that scene is that, like, it's not only just the poetry, but like that style of poetry is like entirely based on the brushstrokes. Like, it's not even just so much the words, it's like the literal beauty and the literal art in writing the words. So it's like she knows that as more abstract as she is, like I kind of get that sense that she's really classically trained, because she can kind of see those things, but she already has her own art. So yeah, I like that too. It's a nice bonding moment too.
I also like when Simon's kind of taking pictures of the city hall wedding. He goes to take a picture of the mom and dad, and the mom's just kind of like sitting like this the entire time. But when she gets her picture, she goes, she smiles for the camera, because it's like, oh, I want, even though I'm feeling terrible, I want this moment to be like happy, which is like a facade of like, in photos you could see your happiness, but underneath it's like your life is terrible, or not necessarily that, but like there's real moments in within the happiness that aren't necessarily happy, which I like that. The city hall wedding versus the wedding banquet, those two different things, I feel like it's like American Taiwanese culture shift there, and I really like that. That really worked out. And then the what else? Oh yeah, Simon and the dad's conversation is really cool. I like that. That worked out. But the entire movie worked out of it not feeling like pandering or for like, like an agenda or anything. It felt more like natural, and the romance between like the two or not the two main characters, but Wei Tung and Simon felt very genuine, which I really liked. It really worked out. But yeah, it was great. It was a great movie.
I agree. One element that particularly worked for me, it's a small sequence, but I thought it was like really powerful, is when she puts the dress on and they see her for the first time. You know what I mean? And she's wearing like the gown, and even Wei Tung there's a cut to Wei Tung where you don't know if he's attracted to her, right? You don't, but it cuts to him and he like, it's weird. He sees her. Does that make sense? Like he sees her. And then there's that whole sequence where she drops to her knees, in that Taiwanese tradition in front of them, and then they start handing out the lotus soup. And
yeah, that's the one I like too.
Yeah,
Definitely.
the eel soup.
Yeah, and then the father gives the speech. He gives that little speech, and what Cassius was talking about in terms of duty, he talks about what it means to be married, and at no point does he talk about affection or attraction or sex or any of that stuff. He talks about what you talk. It's about commitment and duty and character, and like that's a rough scene. You know what I mean? Like it's beautiful, but also kind of like, God damn, they're in the shit now. You know what I mean? Like they're in it now. And we, because we see the difference between what he thinks is valuable in a relationship as opposed to what Simon and Wei Tung value. And Wei Tung even talks about it later, right? When he's coming out to the mom, where like, if it's so hard to find someone who makes, especially for a gay man to he even tells the mom to find a partner who makes me feel the way that Simon does. And it's just interesting. What to me, I was like, that was really, really powerful about, particularly because it's 93, so they can't even get married, right? Homosexual marriage is now allowed, but they couldn't in 93. They would forever have to be. They're never gonna get a wedding banquet. They're never gonna get. They're not even gonna get a city hall marriage. You know what I mean? Like, remember when they legalized gay marriage in the U.S. and like there were hundreds of weddings? Everyone was like, "Let's do this now before they ban it again."
Yeah.
Oh, like we gotta get it done. And so like literally every couple just came out of the woodworks to get it done. I honestly got thought about that, like how powerful that sequence was. All the hoops and traditions that exist, that she has to go through for a sham wedding, but Simon and Wei Tung will never get that, like ever get that. It's the culture. And yeah, that was, to me, kind of like I said, really powerful and heartbreaking. I thought that sequence was beautiful, like just truly, truly beautiful. Yeah, they take the photo, where they're all lined up, and like it's heartbreaking stuff. That worked for me. And all right, so any other last thoughts on what worked? I think a lot worked, but
yeah. Going back to the lotus soup thing, I love that, like, she cried, and then the dad was like, oh, my emotion, my speech moved her, but like the fact that she cried,
yeah,
I love that. I mean, because like you see her character in that cry, if that makes any sense. Like, you see what she's feeling in there in that moment.
Right. It sounds strange. She's probably never felt more alone, right? They establish her as Cassius pointed out, she's a lonely character. Her only friend has been deported. She does this sham marriage in order to get her green card, in order to stay in the country. And as she gets pulled in deeper and deeper, she gets lonelier and lonelier, right? She's literally now in a loveless fake marriage. It's brutal stuff. Like, that's part of why we were talking about it. She ends up being a sympathetic character despite what we're going to talk about. Yeah. I truly think she's a dynamic character. She's one of my favorite characters ever written. All right. Anyways, third question.
What aspect of the movie did you feel wasn't working, and why?
There we go. Here we are. What didn't work?
Other than the rape
I guess
scene, right?
I guess that one we'll get to in a bit. But like, I know, Laura, you had something
the cheesy ending.
Cheesy ending, and then about the mom,
the melodramatic mom. she's like the Meryl Streep of Chinese cinema, but Lori's like, nope, she sucks.
Yeah, it's just too much. I just feel like her whole life was just about getting a grandson, and she just kind of fell apart, and it just seemed comical at a certain point.
I'm kind of waiting. The scene where they're looking through the wedding album and she cries, I was like, yeah, I'm not really feeling it. Yeah, the mom. I want to bring up that scene in particular. Why is the grandson so important to her? She uses the grandfather as an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
She uses it as an excuse, but it's about her, right? Like it's about her. She talks about it openly. Why is the grandson so vital to her?
When she's talking to Wei Wei, when she's looking at the album by herself, she tells Wei Wei that a mother is forgotten when the son grows up or something. So with the grandchild, she won't be forgotten anymore, or she won't continue to be forgotten. She'll be active in like a little boy's life again, or a little son's life again.
Yeah. She found her sense of value was tied to her child, right? Like that's what her sense of value was tied to. And the grandkid, I mean, the father is happy about it, but it's her agenda. And she has that monologue too, where why is he an only child?
Because the dad did his duty and did one and done. I'm telling you.
Funny. No, she specifically says there's a reason why he's an only child.
I'm trying to remember. I can't.
It wasn't that the pregnancy was hard, was it?
Yep. Remember, she talked about how he was born premature.
Oh, that's right.
They had to perform a cesarean, and they damaged her, and she couldn't have any more children. And he was so tiny. She said like a little monkey, or she said something like he was like a little monkey.
You can fit him in your hand. Yeah,
you could fit him in your hand. And then she fed him so much that he was a fat baby, which is adorable. Yeah, because the pregnancy was difficult and the emergency cesarean, she couldn't have any more children. So she's invested in him. Which makes sense. That's why she's constantly sending him the papers. Yeah, and the tapes, and like she's constantly trying to couple him. It sounds weird. She's living vicariously. We think about that a lot with dads, right? Dads are Bobby, Hank Hill, right? Where Hank Hill keeps trying to turn Bobby into a goddamn football player, but he won't be a football player. He's a comedian and a magician, and that boy ain't right. We think about that a lot, where fathers try to live vicariously through the sons, but in this case, it's not the father; it's the mother. The mother is invested in him, like to a point where it's unhealthy, right? Like where it's deeply unhealthy. And when he comes out to her, right, in the hallway, and he explains to her that he can't do or be the son that she wants, straight up, because he's homosexual, right? And she even says, Simon led you astray, right? Simon led you astray. Like he was.
I think that was like her just trying to come up with a million reasons as to why it happened, and she's just trying to make excuses and all that stuff. And I don't know if she really believes it at that point, but like she's just like, I don't know how to describe it. What's the word? She's just distraught. Like there's a lot that just happened. Her husband's like probably dying in the room next to her, and like her son just came out.
Fair enough. That's a rough 3 hours, you know.
Yeah.
Like she's.
I don't know if they're really going to be saying like rational. Like I think, you know what, giving it some thought. No, I think she's
Right. We talked about that last week. That I was actually in another meeting with Leslie, but I know I've mentioned this before. David Rabe references it a lot, where too many characters, he calls it Newtonian drama, right? Where he goes, too many characters in bad writing and bad films follow like math equations. A plus B leads to C, where ideally you always want to have a moment where A plus B and then they do Z, right? They do an unexpected thing because that's the way human, like we've all experienced that where someone comes home and you're like, how was your day? And then they rip your head off. You're like, oh shit, that was not the expected answer, but it's because people are complex. And that's a good point by you, Cassius, is like she doesn't respond in a way that logically makes sense, but as you pointed out, she's had a rough few hours. Her husband had a stroke, her son just came out of the closet to her. She finds out she's literally been bamboozled, right? She they conned her.
Yeah.
And
this is it's a desperate situation. Like, I don't want to say desperate, but she's just like, this is why I talk about how like the film makes a lot of lonely characters, is that like because she loves her son, but she can't, like, she doesn't know how to deal with that. But then her husband, who she like at this point is always kind of like, they always talk about everything, is in the, not talk about everything, but they're very close, is in the room, and just, you know, she can't talk to him, and there's a chance that he could leave. Wei Wei's not there, Simon's not there, there's no one else to talk to, and she's like alone in this situation of just like, I don't know how to describe it. Like, she wants to keep like a family together. I think you're right about like how she wants to keep that like tradition, but like this is she's talking to a person who in her mind may try to sever those ties of like having that traditional family kind of sense, and the other person who would agree with her is in the room, so she just gets this like desperate, almost like bleh, like I don't know how to respond to this kind of like the like feeling, if that makes sense. Like, I think that's what makes it so interesting, is that they just they'll pick certain characters in certain situations and then just kind of like pull away their ability to like connect right away. Like Simon, I'm sure feels super lonely because it's like he's you know,
he's sleeping in the guest room in his own house, you know, pretending to be the landlord. Right, you know.
Wei Wei doesn't see her family. It's all a bunch of like people she's probably never met. Like,
she's alone at the wedding banquet, you know.
Like, everyone expects so goddamn much of her too in this movie, like so much. I think Wei Tung feels super lonely because at a certain point that it's like he doesn't really feel a connection to Wei Wei, but at the same time Simon leaves and it's like now he has to deal with his parents. I think for everyone except for the father, who like at this point is just, I don't know if there's a connection there, but like if I think about it for a bit, but like, yeah, the father never really has that moment of like being alone, but he has so much, his character has so much potential to like make or break situations with other characters, if that makes sense. Like, everyone's a pretty good linchpin for each other. It's a really good dynamic.
I will say this too, it's an example of really good writing because it's a callback, but it's done in such a subtle way that it hits us probably on a subconscious level, but we don't realize it. Is the mother talks about how she only had one son because of the botched marriage, but when the father confesses to Simon that he knows, right? What does he tell Simon?
You're my son now?
You're my son now.
Oh yeah, you're my son now, yeah.
Which is actually a really, again, subconsciously beautiful piece of writing, where the mom is distraught because she only had one son, and then the father is telling the lover, "You're my son now." They have two. Does that make sense in his head? And it's I don't know. I thought that's just like, again, good writing, done subtly. It hits us probably at least on a subconscious level where it's so, again, it's not obvious. That's what I really like about the pieces. It's like it doesn't, as we keep using the term agenda, but really it, like, they're not hitting obvious, they're not hammering the point home so obviously that we get it, you know what I mean? Like, it's done, and it's done like we use the term organically, naturally, blah 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 blah. That, yeah, they now have two sons. That's the way he looks at it. That's the way he perceives it. And so what doesn't work, because now we've gotten to the rape, but any other things that didn't work?
I thought Wei Tung was a little one-dimensional, and it felt like maybe the choice was to have him and his dad show similarities, but I just Wei Tung kind of fell flat to me. Whereas like the father being very stoic is a character in itself, like that works for me, you know what I mean? But the Wei Tung being stoic didn't.
He's extremely passive.
Yeah. So I mean, like it just didn't feel too like, literally there was nothing for him to the choices that he would do were because of other people. He didn't have any driving force himself. So I didn't really like that. That didn't really work for me. And then I feel like some of the character motivations were a little contrived. So like Simon, his anger and storming off kind of, it built up, but it just happened in one night where he just like, I'm out of here, and he got angry and stuff, and that was like, okay, but like how? And like it didn't really show us, because it felt like he was,
I'm kind of
like,
with you on that. He felt like a pretty reasonable character, and then he has a flip out. And I was funny because I was just talking about that's non-Newtonian, but that felt weird. That felt like I need a plot point, and Simon needs to push the plot point. You know what I mean? Like I agree with you on that a little bit.
Also, the mother trying to go with them shopping to stop the abortion, like it makes sense, but like it didn't, because it didn't. When they were having the argument in the breakfast scene or something, she didn't understand what was going on. Like she shouldn't have understood, because they were speaking in English, and she was asking like, what's happening, what's going on? So like, why would she know about any pregnancy or abortion? And for them to go to the abortion and for her to stop it, that felt a little contrived too. And then the father kind of knowing everything without any hints of it felt a little like Deus Ex, I know everything type of thing, instead of like hinting at it. So that kind of didn't work for me, but like the reasoning behind that, it did, if that makes sense. The execution, and then the wedding night was super non-consensual, even though like Wei Tung kind of claimed that he was a little drunk. That still doesn't justify it. If they had shown at least a little attraction or something, you could probably get away with that. But the way it was like written or like seen was very non-consensual, rapey, for that. So but those were my points of like what I felt didn't work.
I was gonna say, just to kind of hit some of those points, I think for the most part, like, this is kind of where I get into my like abstract, I don't know how to like describe this, but like talking about the mom and like how she knew and all that kind of stuff. I think there's context clues for her. I don't think she's like, I think she can figure it out. Like, everyone's having an argument. Simon is outside, arguing with
Wei Tung.
And like they knew about the baby, and it just happens to be so weird that they're like, whereas Wei Tung and Wei Wei have kind of not been really wanting to go out together, they both look super sullen and decide, hey, we're just going to go out shopping, nondescript shopping. We're just going to go out to the market, like for a little bit, for a couple hours. Don't bother us. How like that seems super suspicious. And like, as a mother, I feel like, not me as a mother, but like I think as
right, there's an actual mother in the room, but speak on her behalf, Cassius.
Sorry.
No,
I don't know. I think stuff like that looks super suspicious. Like, I don't know.
I would say so, because Wei Tung, I'm telling you, like he was very flat the entire time. So for him to be like, oh yeah, we're going shopping, and being kind of like sullen, but like it didn't show, like it didn't feel like I showed it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know, it's just, yeah, but they're both sullen going together, and they're not excited to go do anything. It's not like
they don't fake a couple well.
Yeah.
But how you said context clues, like the audience, like we didn't get shown any of that, in the sense of the mother knowing. So that just kind of bumped with me of like, okay, we could like, off screen we could understand that she probably knew and like that, but like it wasn't clear. So it kind of makes you just kind of like, it bumps a little bit of like, that doesn't make sense that she knew, but I guess we could rationalize it that she knew, but it didn't,
I'm with you on that. Like, I think because it kind of falls for me with the Simon thing also, where it seems very like he just wants to dip. Like,
but that's
I
like
think
a backstory that we don't see, right?
Yeah, I think that's the idea, is that it's just like, if we were to include stuff like that, that's so much more screen time to like add into this movie. That's not to say that's not long. It's just like let's just get punching. Like, let's just get going. Like, all these beats are going already. Like, let's just like we're kind of like, and at that point in the movie, we're kind of focusing on Wei Wei and Wei Tung.
Right. Yeah,
a
for
bit
all we
more.
know, they may have shot. I mean, I'm sure there were probably scenes that ended up on the cutting room floor that probably evolved these characters a little more, and that's part of the editing process. Is like, you weigh and measure, is the backstory worth stalling the narrative, blah blah blah.
And that's why I think it's a really good movie, or just good writing just in general, because it's like, I feel like for me there's enough of a like, there's enough context clues for me, at least, or at least there's enough like justification that it's like, okay, I can let that slide. There's a lot of like, not a lot of, but like, there are moments where I can let that slide. If we're gonna talk about the rape scene, I'm gonna at least say this. It's like, me personally, I personally don't like it, but I think the movie like makes it make sense, if that makes, I don't know how to describe it, but like, we've already described that she has an attraction to him, and that at this point, this is like, we can almost call it a low point, or like one of the many beats to the low, going to the low point, is that like, this is her very loneliest point, is that she's this huge wedding that she's been a part of. Do you remember the game they were doing right before they all like told her to get under the bed and everything?
Right.
Like,
take their clothes off.
Yeah. Oh, no, before that one, he's eating cherries off her body, and she's so happy and all this other stuff. Like, there's this like joy that's happening, and like, again, I'm not saying like I advocate for it, but I just see where it's going. Like, I can see where it's coming from, and I understand the motivations. I don't think it necessarily is a knock against the movie. I think it like naturally plays. If that makes sense, like, I think it naturally plays towards the narrative of the structure. I don't think it's something that like, it's a good thing. I think it's definitely like oh wow, yeah, this is a thing that Wei Wei has done, and like, as like, what's the word? I don't know if it was shown for laughs. I don't think it was. I don't think it, but it really wasn't shown for it being so like gruesome either. Like, there's some movies that just really try to go out there for it. And it's shown as like a mistake, and it's shown as like, well, shit, maybe it's not given its full weight to it, but like, I think there's a lot that happens there that it's just like, well, like, it's a mistake. And I will say this, I don't know if she actually apologizes or anything like that.
I can't recall her apologizing.
I don't think so. I think that's the one thing that maybe bumps for me. I think maybe that, where it's just like, there's no like guilt for it, so it's like, but beyond that, I think for the most part, because Wei Wei seems like the kind of person to be.
No, I like that. I like that. Not to be a dick. Man, she should have apologized for raping him at the very minimum. You know what I mean? Like, come on, wait. That's the minimum. Is at least say you're sorry.
But yeah, and like, and I think it. I don't know. Maybe it's just one of those beat points, but like, I think it got there naturally. I don't think it really bumps for me as much as it like, as much as it like is more of a character thing than it is like a bump in the film script, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Plot wise, I feel like it works, but execution wise, I don't think it did.
It has to exist for the plot. It has to. They have to have sex. There's no way she can get pregnant without them having sex. So it has to exist. And maybe they could have figured out a way of doing it.
Yeah,
and, like, so which is a conscious choice. If he has consensual sex with her, how does that change the film? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, because then that turns into a different movie altogether, I think. Like, and then you kind of start to leave that's when you start to leave the idea of like, well, I'm not trying to go away from like,
no,
by people, but
it's a different film.
It's a different film, and I think it lessens Simon's role in, or it'll lead to implications about leaving Simon out, like out to dry while this whole thing happens, if it's consensual, which is unfortunate, which it had, like, it's so awful that it has to be this, but like,
no, this is why I think it's an interesting discussion, because we use the term LGBTQ, right? G and B are two totally different letters because they're two totally different sexual identities. If he has a consensual sex with her, he's no longer gay, he's bisexual. And that's a different film, and it changes the Simon dynamic. You know what I mean? Like, it's a different movie. So I'm with you on that. So it has to exist for the plot, because they're like, we need her to get pregnant. Well, shit. It was like, God damn it.
I think there was a line in there that saying something like, was it me? I think I'm making this up, or there was, where the mom's like, but you had girlfriends before or something, and he was like, oh. So I'm just saying, like, it could have worked better than just like the execution of it, of like him doing his duty, even that, or even being like, oh, Simon or something, even though that doesn't make any sense. But like, like, just, it's just the execution wasn't there. So I mean, who knows if it would work some other way, but it just felt that was a big bump of the execution of that. But the plot, I mean, it had to have happened. Otherwise, like, what else? What other conflict?
It's the trigger for the second half of the movie. Yeah,
exactly. So I'm like, so at least a little bit more consensual, of like them both being drunk, and then in the moment, just
she gets carried away, essentially, is
something like that, because Simon, or Wei Tung tells Simon, oh, I was drunk, but it's like, are you saying I was drunk and I did it, or I was drunk and she took advantage of me? Like, so at least even one little line of like, I was drunk, I didn't know what I was doing, or something like that, like something to justify that a little bit more than just being a kind of rape.
It's got to be such a hard thing to write, though. Like, not saying that you can't write it, but that's got to be like, all right, how do I like finesse this?
Yeah, how do I make this rape acceptable? Because it is what it is. Like, it's not whatever. We're using the term, but it's not like she physically pinned him down and forced herself upon him, but he rejects her, and she pushes the issue. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he literally says no way, or something like that. He says no.
Right. And as Cassius pointed out, like, that's her loneliest moment. Honestly, like, she's at this wedding surrounded by complete strangers with people she doesn't know. She's in this sham marriage. She went through this whole thing, and she's stuck naked in a bed with the guy she's attracted to. And I honestly, it's a moment where, like, God damn it, if I'm doing all this horrible shit, I might as well get one thing out of it. It's like, I might as well get at least, like, whatever. That's kind of what it feels like. As we're sitting here, like, wait, she's such a sympathetic character, despite the rape. She actually is, though. Cool. Any last thoughts? We're gonna go to the Heat real quick. After this, I just want any last thoughts on The Wedding Banquet, which again I think is a fascinating film. Very 90s, some of the cinematography and beats and stuff, but it's
I really like the cinematography. I don't know why. I really enjoy that aesthetic much more than, like,
me too.
Much more than any more recent film. It's
yeah. I mean, you've seen the Pablo short where it's all those long shots and wides, and it's all Hal Hartley 90s. I love 90s cinema, and like, some of the people I know who don't like it, they're like, oh, it's so visually. It's like, go fuck yourself, man. Oh, it's like, everything's all quick cuts and shaky camera. I love the cinematography. I think it's a beautiful movie.
Ooh, one more quick thing I want to point out was that, like, when the mom was, Wei Tung tells the mom that he's gay, and she was like, oh, is Simon influencing you or something like that? She does kind of double down on that when she's cooking with Simon and Wei Tung, or Wei. When Simon's telling her about the family, and it's like, are they gay? And then she's like, I'm not gonna ask him that or whatever. Like, it was kind of that moment of like her doubling down after the fact. But yeah, that was pretty. That scene was pretty funny. Where like he was like, "Oh yeah, my brother is blah 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 blah," and then he's like, she
yeah,
goes,
yeah.
"Yeah, he has a brother."
Yeah, I have a sister. Is she gay? He keeps asking if all his siblings are gay. That's funny.
And there was like this gag where it was just like, "Oh yeah, my brother did this, and then Wei Wei is just like, "Yeah, he has a brother." Like she's not gonna go into the whole story. It's just like, yeah.
I like where she goes, does he have any brothers? He goes, and she asks Simon, do you have any brothers? And he goes into this long, detailed answers. I have 2 brothers. He was a little but one lives in Santa Fe, and then Wei Wei just goes, no. You know, she just like translates as no or whatever. That's funny, and I love the running gag that she can't fucking cook. Yeah. Like not even eggs. Like there's even that scene where like Simon's pulling eggshells out of the fucking breakfast, but they're all trying to hide the fact that she can't even cook eggs. I don't know. It's just a funny thing where like in this heartfelt, thoughtful movie, they still have like little tiny running gags. You know, the neighbors. They keep showing the neighbors who are creeped out because they're gay.
We're doing the professional photos, and everybody's kind of like, look left, and they're like, all of them, and then in a seated behind the camera, they're all kind of like smile, and they're doing the same thing that they're being asked to do. Yeah, that was pretty funny.
There's some funny stuff in there. Like like, you know, it is. I enjoy that it's this like thoughtful, heartfelt movie exploring these heavy themes, but they still made room for like gags. You know what I mean? Like the wedding, the city hall wedding. That shit makes me laugh. Where the officiant doesn't give a shit what they're saying, right? And do you wait? She's just like wait, and like she's just yelling out, "Have hold, die, or death." And then like whatever, just shrugs it. Like how that's the mom has to cry. It's so pathetic. Cool, awesome. All right, so last thoughts on the wedding banquet are wrapped up. So let's talk about The Heat. I know Lori read it. Some of you may have actually just chosen to watch it.
I did both.
Good. Kate DePold, good writer. She started out as a sketch writer from Mad TV. Michael Schur hired her. She was started as a sketch writer from Mad TV. Michael Schur discovered her and then hired her. She was one of the main writers for Parks and Rec, and The Heat was her first screenplay. She's also famous for writing the Ghostbusters film that was trashed, probably unjustifiably, simply because it dared to cast females. She's an occasional actress. She's actually in The Heat. She's the nurse, the blonde nurse at the very end. She's also has a cameo in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Funny human being, just a generally funny human being. I think a good script, but let's talk about it. And let's go through those questions on The Heat. I know Lori posted them, and Lori's got a bounce, so we'll start with Lori. Question 1.
What 2 elements do you find effective as a reader?
Good.
Let's see. I guess just because we're doing video, might as well read them off.
Sure.
So this is Lori. I like that Ashbourne's flaw is shown in the first scene. She's seen as cocky and not a team player. 2 early examples are she's in command of a raid, and the other one is at a Chinese restaurant. This flaw may prevent her from replacing Hale as head of the Criminal Investigation Division. The obstacle is her unlikability. The obstacle is her unlikability, which she needs to change to get the job. Yeah, that was really effective for me. I was like reading that. I was like, damn, we're on page 8 and it's already happening. Like, this is crazy good.
It's a good opening. It's a fantastic opening, right? Where she's in the raid. It is. Whether you like that genre of movie or not, it's good writing. You know what I mean? She knocks it out of the park. Knocks it out of the park. Yeah, that opening scene is great. Both on script and in the film. Sandra Bullock's a good comedian.
Yeah.
She's talented.
There's a couple more. I also like how Ashburn and Mullins' personalities as being headstrong creates tension between the two. It works as a great buddy story. Mullins is street smart but lacks finesse/tact. Ashburn is overconfident by the book and makes mistakes.
Right.
And then I like the humor of the forensics experts when he describes who the first prints belong from the matches. He doesn't realize he calls Mullins a nut job and then lists off her crimes.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. So Lori, Tash just read it, but do you have any thoughts you want to say in person before you bounce out?
No, I mean, I really liked the two leads. I liked how they're both considered like there's not many men in the force, so they kind of like have to rely on each other. Even though they don't at the beginning they don't like each other because they're both you know, they're very like I guess
Headstrong.
aggressive.
Right.
It's not it's not assertive necessarily, but aggressive at the beginning. I mean, maybe Washburn, what's her name? Ashburn is more
Ashburn.
assertive, but she kind of she has a little bit more tact and doesn't like go over people's heads and like, throw things at them, that kind of thing.
Yeah, like one's a legit felon, right? Like one's an arsonist and is kind of insane. She's the rogue, Mel Gibson character. Whatever, the cop who doesn't play by the rules. Then Ashburn is the genius and whatever.
Yeah, doesn't she tackle one of the other officers in the station because the criminal Roses was questioned?
Right. It's interesting because if you watch the film, how many scenes from the screenplay didn't make it into the movie?
Yeah. And then what's interesting too is seeing like scenes, but in different parts of the movie. If you watch the film, like you'll see a scene like in page 30 or something, and then it's at the end of the movie. So I thought that was pretty funny. That's
Right.
cool. Like that. These scenes are good enough to be in the film, but we'll kind of put it where it belongs. Yeah.
They puzzled it together. Yeah, I agree. Like, for example, the forensic scene is non-existent in the film. I mean, there's a scene there, but the forensic expert doesn't talk, right? Like she's like it's a female in the film, but yeah, and the screenplay, that's a huge moment. How do they reveal that in the film? Do you remember the difference between the film and the screenplay?
Are you talking about the scene in
the revelation?
where...
The revelation she's an arsonist and is slightly
yeah, it's kind of similar. It is similar, because how they played in the film is Marlon Wayans is there saying like, oh yeah, this one's like he's reading off all the crimes that she does, and then the photo plays out. Picture her, and she's like right there, and he's like, oh god, like I'm reading off these crimes and it's you, it was pretty effective the same way as in the screenplay. One thing that changed though was when you said forensic, I was thinking of the autopsy scene where Ashburn kind of makes a joke, and it's like, "Oh, you're the wife. Oh shit!"
That was awesome. So sorry. I had to stop reading and actually laugh at that one. I was surprised.
That was really hilarious.
That was good.
They didn't put that in the movie, but they did kind of do a play on that where she makes a joke, and then Mullins kind of like
where they cut the guy's tongue out and shoved it in his ass. Yeah. And then Ashburn goes, he's being tongue in cheek. And then this we're like, don't do that.
Yeah, that was really funny.
I agree. That's a funny line in the screenplay. Like it made me laugh out loud, and it didn't make it into the movie. Drives me bonkers. I was like,
I feel like it was probably too like offensive of like not being on Ashburn's side, but I thought it was hilarious. Like I think they were scared of like Ashburn not being likable after that because it's like, oh shit, like it was a pretty bad mistake, and you're insulting the wife of the deceased right in front of her face. It was hilarious, but I think she would have been unsympathetic after that in Hollywood's eyes,
as opposed to making a terrible joke, tongue in cheek. I remember that. Yeah, this is what we're talking about. Like Sandra Bullock's talented. She sold that moment. That was funny as fuck. She made that moment work. The look on her face when she makes that joke, she's so excited, and then it's such a bad joke. It's cute. It's really cute. All right. Other elements that you thought maybe worked or didn't work?
I'm just going to piggyback on just, I guess what worked for me as far as just like piggyback on Laurie's is just, the characters are so really well defined very quickly too. And like
the sandwich
the sandwich.
Yeah, the sandwich.
and especially like their place in the world. Like what's it called? Ashburn, you can see immediately is like super strict, especially about like the signal thing, and then like she grabs the guy like, no, that means left, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. She's like,
let's go on 3, and then they just go without her waiting. Yeah, that kind of shit,
And then with oh my god, how am I forgetting your name?
Mullins.
Yeah. It's like the cop is like the head cop in that place is just like, oh, I don't need this today.
Biff.
Yeah.
Biff
Yeah.
from Back to the Future. Yeah.
He's like, I don't need this, and then it's
I'm
just
40.
like,
What did he say? I'm 43 years old.
Yeah,
How
he's
old
like,
do you think
how
I
do you
am?
think I am? I'm like 60,
She
61.
says
I'm 43.
58. You're
Yeah.
58. I'm 43. I round up.
Yeah, and he's like, don't, like, she's gonna get really mad, and then like everyone already kind of figures out like
she's
there's
gonna
already
get
like
really mad. Yeah.
So I like that a lot because it sets everyone up. It talks about like, what is it, the 3 ways we know a character. It's like what
Right.
people say about them, what the character says, and then what the character does.
Right.
So this is definitely that bottom level of like, not bottom level, but just like that third point of like what everyone
Talks
tells about them.
Yeah,
and you're like, oh boy, this one's like, this person's probably going to be a hard ass. So it's like, okay.
That's a good point. I want to address that real quick. Is the 3 ways of defining a character, right? Cassius brought it up. The strongest is, how do we define a character? Show them doing something, right? The characters are defined by
achieved.
Right.
That is
characters
achieved.
are defined by what they do, what they say, and what others say about them. That's the 3 ways you can define a character. And in order, you're right. Like in terms of strength, what they do is always the strongest. What they say is next, and then what others say is usually the weakest way of defining a character. But it's a really effective tool in the beginning of films. It's an old Shakespearean device where, you know how he always introduces badass characters? By having motherfuckers talk about them before they show up. He does it with Macbeth. He does, like, the first 2 scenes of Hamlet's not in the goddamn play. It's just people talking about him. So that when he finally arrives, you know what I mean? Like, oh shit. One other film I thought did that effectively is Sexy Beast, the Ben Kingsley character. He's only in the film for like 8 minutes, and he won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, right? But they talk about him and what a monster he is and what a piece of shit he is, and like his name gets brought up. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but his name gets brought up. And they're like, oh, and you just like eyes pop, and everyone is like, God damn it. And then it's super funny because the instant they cut to him, he looks like a middle school science teacher, right? He's got a look, you're like, that guy, that's the guy that everyone is so terrified of. And it's adorable and it's humorous. And then sure enough, he sits on a plane and he's smoking a cigarette, right? He's walking through an airport. You're like, that's the guy everyone's scared of. Weird, funny. And then we're finally introduced to him. He's on an airplane. He's smoking a cigarette. And the stewardess walks up to him. The flight attendant walks up to him and she goes, excuse me, sir, you have to put the cigarette out. And he goes, I will. And he won't. And he doesn't, right? She says, so you have to put it out. He goes, I will. And then the guy behind him leans over the seat and he goes, why don't you just put the cigarette out? And then he just grabs the guy by the head and he's like, I'll put it out. I'll put it out in your fucking eyes where I'll put it out. And you're like, oh shit, this guy is, does that make sense? He is everything they're talking about. So it's a nice, like that whole film, I don't know if anyone has ever seen it. It's the shortest performance ever to win an Academy Award. He plays an asshole and he's just 8 minutes of total asshole, but it works because everyone talks about him first. Does that make sense? I think that's something the screenplay does with Mullins. She'll get mad. That's a really funny, she'll get mad. Her own boss is afraid of her. Good. Any other things?
I think Ben Kingsley loves doing that.
Oh yeah.
So in what you were saying now about how to introduce the character, I was thinking about how in About a Boy, you have the guy, like you have voiceover while he's doing stuff for like the guy, and then you have the same for the boy. And I always thought that was like a really good, because I mean the whole like inner voiceover thing, like it continues in the rest of the film, but I always thought that was like this inner dialogue while this person, and it just creates such funny scenes throughout the film. But that was, I think, also like a good way to introduce a character, just by like listening to their thoughts while you were watching them do stuff.
No, that's a good point. I love About a Boy. I think it's a great film. And of course it's a Hornby. It's based on Hornby, who's a novelist.
Yeah, exactly. It's based on a book, and you can clearly see that it's structured, it's layered, and it's really well thought out because of that.
Right. No, I agree. I love that film. I know we talked about it last week. I love that film. Yeah, and that's like I said, there are three methods of doing it, and typically having characters talk about a character is considered the weakest method. But I personally think if you do it at the beginning, it's effective. It sets the table. Does that make sense? Like, and then when the guy arrives, it's again like it's an old Shakespearean technique. They talk about Macbeth. They talk about Macbeth before Macbeth shows up. Like this, literally, the opening scene of Macbeth is a guy walks out, this wounded soldier, and the king goes, "Tell me about the battle." And he goes, "Oh, things look lost." And then Macbeth showed up, and he this is an actual line, and he goes, and he split a guy from nave to mouth. He cut a guy from his genitals to his head, which is like Shakespeare going, "The dude is a badass." Does that make sense? Like this, he literally split a guy in half, which is kind of amazing. Yeah. It's an old technique. Talk about a guy, talk about a guy, talk about a guy, or talk about a character, I should say, and then introduce the character. Like I said, the opening of Hamlet is everyone talking about what a badass Hamlet is, and then he shows up, which is why quick tangent, which is why I think so many Hamlets are shitty, because he's always like the Ethan Hawke one in particular. He's always portrayed as this like mopey, whatever, depressed like art student, like he's some emo kid. He's not, one, he's not a kid, he's 28, and two, he's a legendary ass kicker. You know what I mean? Like if he was a guy, he'd be the captain of the football team or some shit. But he's always portrayed as this confused guy because his situation is complex. But we'll get into why Hamlet is never portrayed well, but whatever. Because I swear to God, it's like people ignore those opening scenes where they talk about how ferocious he is. So it's like if you spend the opening talking about how Mullins is a zany, rogue, out of control character, and then she shows up and is not headstrong or something, or is essentially, that's what makes her work as a character. Is she's she's like a blunt force instrument. You know what I mean? Like there's not a lot of thoughtfulness, and like she literally opens the door and just throws a phone book in the dude's face. That's her interrogation methods, she is what she is. And I think it's pretty funny that she is a blunt force instrument. That's exactly the way I was thinking about her. She wears the sweatpants and the turns her shirt inside out. I love how they pointed that out. She wore the same shirt the entire film. She just kept turning it inside out. She wears the same clothes all week. Yeah, there's some funny stuff there. Kate DePool's a funny writer. She's a funny person.
What
cool.
worked for me, one of the elements that worked for me is how rounded the characters are, like how dimensional they are. Because yeah, you say that Mullins is this like blunt force character, but she also is very intuitive, and it's shown that throughout the screenplay. What's it called? Laurie said Ashburn is very assertive and aggressive at the beginning, but you see she has insecurities. So they're multi-level characters, which really works. And then another element that really works is the buddy comedy, or the cop buddy comedy. Stuff like I only saw it once, but I thought it was terrible. That Bruce Willis
Cop Out.
Cop Out, yeah, I thought that was terrible. So like there are terrible buddy cop movies, but this one was a great buddy cop movie, well written. So yeah, those two elements, just the buddy cop genre,
right?
She hit that on the head, on the target, and then the multifaceted characters.
Yeah, I want to address this like super quick. The buddy cop as a genre is actually a relatively recent genre, right? There's no buddy cop movies in the 50s, 60s. The first is considered the first film was 48 Hours, the Nick Nolte, Eddie Murphy movie. So that's the template. You know what I mean? That was again a surprise hit. Eddie Murphy was like 20 years old when he made that goddamn movie. Blah blah blah. And if you watch, for those of you who haven't seen it, I mean, the premise is simple. Eddie Murphy is a criminal, and Nick Nolte is a racist white cop. And so they put them together for 48 hours, and they got to solve a crime. And the humor in that film is their antagonism. he keeps stealing his lighter. They keep punching each other in the face. They end up buddies, but they're not. Yeah,
Well, you
yeah,
say it's pretty recent, and you mentioned the 50s, but like from that point on, like it was before the 2000s, it was abundant. There
Yep.
was a bunch of buddy cops. After the 2000s, there was a bunch of terrible buddy cops movies, and this was one of the standout ones that were.
Yeah.
It was just really great.
I agree. Yeah, it's
Wasn't
one of
there one with like this guy braiding this white guy's hair or something? Or was that not buddy cop? But
that's the Will
something
Ferrell
so
prison
bad.
movie. The Will Ferrell.
maybe, yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
I think so.
The Get
Oh my
Hard.
Will
God.
Ferrell. Yeah, Get Hard.
Get Hard. Mhm.
That's a
I haven't
terrible
watched
film.
it. I've just seen the poster and I was like, this is something I definitely don't want to see.
That's a good.
It's
It's a terrible film. We were talking about
not
anal
great.
rape as a source of comedy. That's one of those movies
Mhm.
where it's like, oh, you're gonna go to prison, and he's got to teach him to get hard so he can survive prison, so he doesn't get raped. The entire premise of the movie is him not getting raped. Which
Well, there's
is
the whole
like, just-
there's the whole like gay panic thing where he touches another dude's dick and then you
Yep.
actually see the dick, and yeah, it's not
that's
great.
that's a terrible film. It's an awful film, and I'm actually disappointed that Kevin Hart and Will Ferrell read it and were like, let's do this. I
That
think it's a shitty fucking movie.
I feel like movies like those, sorry, just to go off a quick tangent, like movies like those are just like quick cash grabs to kind of like, for the actors at least, or for some of the people, just because it's like, I don't know. You never hear them talking about it after. You never hear them ever mention it. Like no one talks about it. It's one of those things where everyone like winks at each other and is like, all right, we're just
Here's a
gonna write
paycheck.
this. Yeah, I need
This-
this for my taxes.
There's a talking about a buddy cop movie. I can't even remember the title. I remember watching it. I was with my friend Cromwell, but there was an Anthony Hopkins, Chris Rock buddy cop movie from like the 2000s. Like we can look it up. I can't remember. Like
Yeah,
whatever.
I remember that. for
yeah,
sure.
Chris
I
Rock.
haven't seen that one either, but just like the trailer.
Yeah, is a Chris Rock, Anthony Hopkins buddy cop film, and like where he's an FBI, whatever. but it's a
Bad
buddy-
Company.
Bad Company. I will always remember this. They were on the Oprah Winfrey show, and they were promoting the movie. And Oprah Winfrey asks Chris Rock, she goes, "Why did you make the film?" And Chris Rock goes, "Oh," and Chris Rock is on. He's like, "I'm not a great actor." Da, 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 da. He's like, "I'm not a great actor, but it's a chance to work with Anthony Hopkins." So I was like, "Sure, I'd love to work with Anthony Hopkins. It's a opportunity of a lifetime to work with one of the greatest actors of all time." Da 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 da. And then they ask Anthony Hopkins, they're like, "Why did you make the movie?" He goes, "Oh, I had a house in Malibu that needed a payment." And that's it. Like he clearly did not like the movie. He didn't, he did say he did say plus it was fun to hang out with Chris Rock for 6 weeks. He did not give a shit about the film. He did exactly what Cash has said. It was a paycheck. You know what I mean? He's like,
I mean, see Jack and Jill. That was a paycheck for Al
Jack and
Pacino.
Jill.
Terrible movie. I don't even think I even finished it, but yeah.
That film
Is that Fun with Jack and Jill or?
No. Fun with Dick and Jane was pretty good.
Oh
It was
yeah,
with,
that I liked a lot.
Yeah.
No,
Fun with
Jack
Dick
and
and
Jill
Jane,
was Adam Sandler
like a
is a
dual
pair of
role.
twins.
Yeah.
Yeah. A brother and a sister twins.
So bad.
And terrible movie.
It is so bad. And Al
And Al Pacino's in
Pacino's
it. Yeah.
attracted to the female Adam Sandler.
I cannot
Oh.
even imagine, like really.
The Dunkachino.
Duncan.
No, like Adam Sandler as a person is like not attractive, but then like a female version, I cannot like.
And it's oh, it's not good. It's
so bad.
It's like
so
everything
bad.
everything that Adam Sandler does that you may not like is in that movie.
To the maximum. It's
the max.
Watch
so
Adam Sandler
bad.
be watching this whole video because we're gonna upload it or whatever. The discussion is great, and then us shitting on Jack and Jill.
And he has like a single tear as he's watching it.
Yeah, Adam Sandler.
I
like,
liked him in one film ever, and that was the one with like the little boy and the
Oh,
baby.
Big Daddy.
Big Daddy. Yeah, Big Daddy's really good.
Just that. That's the only
That one's
film where I
fun.
could stand him a little bit.
I liked him in Uncut Gems, and I like him in Punch Drunk Love.
Punch Drunk Love is
English is good. Like he has I love Airheads. Airheads was amazing.
Okay, Airheads is pretty funny.
Yeah.
Speaking of Brendan Fraser, yeah, I actually like that film. Oh man, we're off the rails now. Talk about
yeah, we'll get back.
Airheads. Yeah, we're in the Adam Sandler filmography. Yeah. No, it's fair. It's fair to talk about this because it is a comedy, and comedies can go off the rails, and that's one of the things I like about The Heat. The only moment that bothered me in the script, and it didn't work in the film, is where God, it drives me bonkers. Is where Mullins catches one of the criminals at gunpoint, and then Julian sneaks up behind her, and then Ashburn shows up, and then he goes, "Who are you guys?" And she goes, "Who are we? We're the Heat." Oh, that drives me bonkers. I absolutely.
We're a Suicide Squad.
Oh God, I hate it. It's a thing for me. I hate when people put the title of the fucking movie or play in the dialogue.
We're the Heat 2 Electric Boogaloo.
We're in Punch Drunk Love.
No, like Arthur Miller does that shit. He's a brilliant playwright, but in every goddamn play, they're all my sons. You're like, we get it. It's the title of the fucking play.
Oh yeah, no, I live in Synecdoche, New York.
Yeah. It is a death of a salesman. Oh Jesus.
Seems like there's a death at this funeral.
I did click on it, and I did agree to the terms of endearment.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Good job, fucking stretching that one. Yeah. So okay, so a couple elements worked, particularly as Lori pointed out, the characters. Plot wise, what do we think about the actual plot?
I like the way it worked out in the movie better than the screenplay, because the screenplay had this whole thing where they go on a boat, they're out of the city for like 6 days, and then they come back, and like the bad guys didn't do any moves during that time, so it felt very like convenient, and
it loses urgency.
Yeah, there you go. So that didn't work for me. Although, like, I mean, it being a buddy cop movie, the bad guy, them doing, stopping him, worked, and they improved it in the movie, in the film. So, but that part just bumped for me. That didn't work too well.
Okay. Any other elements? I'll say one thing that worked for me, but it just reminds me of my childhood. The fucking Irish Catholic family. God damn, dude. I was getting PTSD flashbacks.
Wait, that worked or that didn't work?
Oh, it worked for me.
Oh yeah.
Like, this is where they're all just screaming at each other, and they got like the basketball Jesus, and dude, fucking goddamn, that's my entire life. That made me laugh. Like I actually sympathized with the whole Irish Catholic screaming at each other. Shit's pretty funny. Bill Burr, I'm also a big Bill Burr fan. I thought one thing that made me laugh, it's a kind of a meta joke, was Joey McIntyre playing her brother. I don't know if you guys remember that. Like, she had 3 brothers, right? And Bill Burr is the oldest one, or 4 brothers. Michael Rappaport is the one who gets shot, blah, blah, blah. But the baby one, remember the one who dates Gina? And they have to go pick her up, and she's wearing the
Oh yeah.
Joey McIntyre is from Boston, which is funny, but he was a member of New Kids on the Block. So it's like a little meta joke in there that I thought was like stunt casting. He was part of New Kids on the Block. He was a teen idol. My sister had his poster all over her walls. I don't know why. I just thought it was really funny, the idea that this teen idol is now dating like Gina, like this. Just dump her. I don't know. That made me chuckle a little bit. Jane Curtin as the mom. I actually thought it was a really effective thing where Ashburn is what? What's her family situation?
She's the only child. Oh no, actually, she's the only child in the screenplay, I believe, but in the movie, she's a foster kid.
She's a foster kid. They actually altered it. which I thought was an interesting choice. And then we see Mullins, who's not the only child. I mean, it exists in the screenplay. They changed it in the actual film. So we have an only child, and Mullins is part of a large family, right?
Mhm.
Which is a thing that's an actual thing. It's tied to the character identities. In fact, protecting her family becomes Mullins' central goal, right? We talk about how there's an initial goal and then a secondary goal. The initial goal is take down the drug thing, the drug lord, right? But then the secondary goal becomes protect her family at all costs, even though her family hates her, right? They hate her because of what she did. But she's still going to defend them to the death, right? Which is actually, it sounds strange in a silly, cheesy buddy cop movie. That's a pretty heavy goal, right? Like that's a character that with stakes and a sense of urgency and a goal that is easily identifiable. Protect her family at all costs. And interestingly, she's the one who put them in danger to begin with, right? So I actually do think that's effective writing, and I also think it's effective because, again, in the film she's a foster child, in the screenplay she's an only child, but they Depold as the writer highlights the difference, and just to the point where at the end of the movie, what does she write in the yearbook?
I think in the screenplay, I think it's only something like just a fucking nerd thing,
Right.
And then in the movie, it says fucking nerd, but then also that we're sisters now.
You have a sister now, right? Yeah. So it's one of those things where in the film they really found that element and then they pushed it harder in the film than it exists in the screenplay. But it does exist in the screenplay. But what happened was Paul Feig, the director or something, found something he can attach to. It's the idea. I know it sounds weird being a male, right? Whatever. But he attached himself to the idea of sisterhood, and like that they would eventually become sisters. It sounds strange, but the film is about them becoming sisters, right? And like not just whatever. So that's the thematic element that the film attaches that the screenplay had, but maybe didn't centralize or highlight. Does that make sense? Happens a lot in films. All right, next question, next discussion point.
So the first one was what two elements do you feel effective? The second one is what aspect of the screenplay did you feel wasn't working for you? And the third one is there something in the screenplay you'd consider adopting in your own craft?
What didn't work for you guys?
One thing that didn't work for me though, like from screenplay to film, was I liked all the jokes in there, most of the jokes in the screenplay, and in the film I felt there was just too much McCarthyisms, too much improv that was like, oh man, it was stronger in the screenplay. I felt there was a couple moments, I think like one or two that stood out of like a good improv, but otherwise it was just kind of like rambling, and I felt it was stronger in the screenplay.
I agree. A lot of those anti-communist sentiments, wasn't a big fan of with that McCarthyism. Sorry.
Nice. No, I agree with you. Actually, I think she's a pretty gifted comedian, and some of her improvs make me laugh. But I honestly agree with you. I think the pulled screenplay is funnier.
Yeah. It's tighter. The jokes are tighter, and it didn't ramble because Melissa McCarthy, she's funny, but like, I mean, I think it is just more improv type movies, because I mean, you kind of see it in other improv movies, but I laugh at most of them, but just the rambling improv off, just it wasn't working for me too much in this movie. Even though she was funny and great, there was a couple moments where I was like, okay, cut a minute off that and it'll be funny. But yeah, I mean, the screenplay worked out well. It's just the transition to the film that what's threw me off. Also, like I said, the thing that didn't work for me was the urgency of the whole going to on a ship and then leaving the country for like a week. Kind of threw off the the flow of it. But otherwise, I mean, it was a good. Good. Oh, another thing was I think Mullins or Ashburn, they tie what's his name, the drug dealer at the beginning. They tie him to like a plane, and the plane is taking off, and I'm like, I don't know if that would work, because like right when they untie him,
Rojas, right?
Yeah, Rojas, yeah. So they tie him to a plane, and they're questioning him, and the plane is taking off, and he has to run, and Mullins is running after him, and this is in the screenplay, and they're questioning him, and he's like, okay, I answered my question. As soon as they uncuff the handcuffs, the plane takes off, and I'm like, you don't understand. Like, I was thinking, like, you probably don't understand like the mechanics of how fast the plane needs to be going to take off.
Right.
So yeah, that bumped for me. And then also Rojas kind of like being they do like the same kind of concept in the movie, but Rojas is like a backstabby person. Like at the end, he was like, it was me the whole time. And I was like, okay, understood, it is definitely you. And it was improved a little bit in the film where it was a gag, and it was hilarious because like in movies, albino people are like
the villain,
evil,
right?
Yeah, are the villain. And this albino dude was like was a cool dude, but it was his partner that was like the deceptive, like I was him the whole time. It worked better than the screenplay, but yeah, they probably could have done better in the film. But I feel like it worked better in the screenplay. In the screenplay, the whole Rojas being like the double crosser, I was like, it didn't really work for me.
Right. I agree. Yeah, the whole Rojas was the secret mastermind. It doesn't work for me in the screenplay. Yeah, in the film, the Terran Killiam character, it just makes sense. It's a better choice. Interestingly enough, like it was just a small tweak. It sounds weird, but like to change the mastermind, the plot twist was actually a small tweak, because the mastermind is not the antagonist, right? He's not. He just shows up at the end. The antagonist is the Julian character or whatever, right? The Mad TV guy. Which is interesting too. Kate DuPont being from Mad TV, and all these Mad TV actors being in the film. So there's that. Taron Killian was in it, and the stabber, the knife guy, who puts the oyster knife in her leg.
Yeah, I think that's Julian, right?
Yeah, Julian, and it's Michael McDonald is Julian, I think. Anyways, cool. Yeah, there's some things that bump for me too, particularly in the screenplay. I again with you, the ship thing doesn't work for me at all. The Rojas thing didn't work for me at all. Okay, so we'll go this elements in the screenplay that you think you can incorporate.
I mean, it was a tight screenplay. So just like the tightness of even the jokes, like if I'm doing a comedy,
Yep.
The jokes were very tight, and it wasn't like redundant jokes, because like there was like one or two lines in there in the screenplay where it was kind of like redundant in like a reaction, and then it's like, oh, and then like they react again or something, like they voice their reaction,
Right.
which was kind of not too good. But like the jokes themselves, like the structure in those jokes were really well done, and I would incorporate that in something I would write.
No, I agree with you. I think her jokes are tight, and I mean, this is a sitcom writer, right? She's a sketch writer for Mad TV, and then she wrote for Parks and Rec, which is one of the funniest shows of all time. So she can definitely tell a joke. And so when you talk about joke structure, since it is a video, what specifically about the structure of her jokes? Can you elaborate on that a little bit? What makes her jokes work?
It's just like the expectations that you put in the premise, and then the punchline is kind of a subvertive of the expectation. So, for example, when they go to like Tatiana's apartment, and it's played in the movie, also in the film, but in the screenplay, yeah, like you see this Albanian woman just kind of like toss a bucket of slop down the hallway, and Mullins isn't like reactive to it, and Ashburn is. But then at the end, when it's like the payoff is her living there, so it's like she's used to this whole thing, and so that worked like of in the screenplay, because it's written like, oh, Mullins doesn't care that this Albanian woman is throwing slop in the hallway, and Ashburn is kind of like, what the fuck is this? But then the payoff is like Mullins is living there, and there's a bunch of little jokes in there too. But just even that worked. Does that make sense? Like,
no, because she actually has the line where I live here, and then Ashburn thinks she's lying because she's scoping the place out or whatever. But sure enough, I actually think that's really funny. They interrogate Tatiana, and then she just moves right down the hall and unlocks her door and enters, and she literally lives next door to her. Oh, like
in the screenplay, in the screenplay too, there's another joke where they didn't put it in the movie, where this old lady is like coming out of the door next to Tatiana's, and then Ashburn's like, do you know who lives there? Like, is Tatiana home? And the old lady's like, no, she's not. And then Mullins goes, you know what I see? I see a fucking liar, and like accuses the old lady, and she's like, okay, she's in there or something like that. And so it's like, it's funny that Mullins is like being aggressive, but then the payoff is that she lives there. So it's like, oh dude, that's hilarious that like she knows this old lady living next to Tatiana, and she knows that she's a fucking liar. So that's just kind of like an added payoff. I thought that was really great. So the structures of the jokes are really well done.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, that's the joke. It's like, I remember, Michael Schur talked about this. When you write a joke, in order for a joke to be, and we remember we had that whole kind of joke session that one time, where you set up a premise and then you push the premise to its breaking point, and then you subvert the premise.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, the whole premise that she actually lives there, and it subverts the idea that she's just a hard-boiled cop on the case. She does live there. It's pathetic, right? And it's a funny line where she goes, I don't have the window blankets. You mean curtains? Whatever. Like, that's how undomesticated she is like, the word curtains is like beyond her vocabulary. The sandwich, all that shit. Like, there's funny stuff in there.
In the screenplay, the curtains things play out really funny too, because Ashburn gifts her some curtains,
right?
And then she gifts it to the brother, and the brother's like, "Oh, thanks for the blankets."
Yeah.
So it continues on. The gag continues on.
Right. I don't have the window blankets. That's some funny stuff. Cool. Any elements you found, Cassius?
In the
writing?
I was actually going to piggyback, because I was going to. Sorry, I keep saying that, but I was reading through Lori's, because I forgot to add her on the last one. But the number 3 for hers is the chemistry created between the two leads through humor and showing how they become partners to strive to find the big bad Russian. She says, I like how the writer made each one's flaws something the other one could help with, and the stakes were high. Even if they did not work together, they would die. Like, I think definitely that, like, the dynamic between Mullins and Ashburn are like, it's really good. Like, it's kind of hard to describe. It's like, we talked about buddy cop already and all that kind of stuff, but it's just I like that dynamic, and that's something I'm trying to focus on, is just kind of character dynamics on like that work. So that way, if you took one of those elements out, it would just completely, like, it would not make the script work, if that makes sense. Like, I'm trying to get away from characters that don't have anything to do.
Cool. No, agreed. I super agree. Like, it's a well written, it's a well executed screenplay. Like, her jokes are tight. It's ultimately a character study. The plot's not insanely complex, right? It's not.
Right.
This isn't like a Mammoth film where it's like, get all confused. It's not Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy or anything. So it's ultimately about, what we talk about, characters being reforged and da da da. So the last thing I want to address, because I think it is effective, how are they reforged? How do these characters dynamically change? How are they fundamentally different at the end than they were from the beginning?
It's kind of played more into the film. So like Sandra Bullock doesn't say bad words in the film. And then towards the end, it's like she kind of loosens up and starts saying bad words and going with like the Mullins version of being a cop. And then Mullins is like, oh, like I don't need anybody's help. And so she kind of asks for Ashburn's help with taking down the all these drug people to lure out Julian, or I don't know what the Russian version of the name is, but yeah, in the screenplay, I mean that's the thing where they're like they have a montage, and the montage works in the screenplay as well as the film, where Ashburn's like, oh yeah, you don't see anything to the drug sniffing dog, and then she like reveals a bunch of heroin and stuff. So like all that whole was justified in the screenplay because they're like, oh, we're gonna take down all these drug dealers so we could lure out the Russian guy. But Mullins asks for her help, and so that worked out.
Cool. Your thoughts, Cassius? How did they fundamentally? Who's the protagonist, real quick?
Oh, you're muted again.
Sorry, I wanted to say Ashburn.
I think it's Ashburn too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the central protagonist, right?
I don't know. I'm trying to think of a scene specifically.
Did it not fundamentally change? Just
no, it's not that. So whilst I was in the throes of my terrible cowboy songs and my drinking, is when I was reading this. So I'm trying to like.
When's the moment that we see that they've changed?
You're gonna have to skip me on this one. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah, anyone have one thought? We can end it pretty soon. But is there a singular moment where we realize, oh, they fundamentally changed?
Well, in the movie, I'm pretty sure it was in the screenplay also, but like, what's it called? Ashburn defends Mullins when they're making fun of Mullins.
Yep.
And says like, oh, she's a better cop than all of you guys and me. She's a way better cop than me.
You're talking about she cusses. That's the moment where like she defends Mullins, and then she's like, you guys are poop, cock, suck, fuck, dick, ball, zit fuckers, or something. She's terrible at it. But she's so fundamentally emotional and moved that like she abandons her, in defense of her friend. And she abandons all these values that she used to think were important. And also too, who's in the room when she does that?
The chief or the
person,
supervisor?
The supervisor she's been trying to impress the entire fucking film. And so what that tells us is she doesn't give a shit. Right? We talk about singular goals and the changing. Ashburn's singular goal is to impress the chief. That's all she wants, or the supervisor, right? To get that promotion is to impress him. And then at a certain point, impressing him stops being the singular goal. And the singular, her clear visible goal is no longer impress the supervisor, but be there for Mullins to help Mullins fight for her family. Right?
Right.
It's in the screenplay and it's in the film. Yeah, that's to me the moment. That's the moment where the protagonist reveals that they've been fundamentally changed, which is funny because they're apart at that moment, which is the way, right? Only through loss do we realize what she had. And then she goes and saves her, and we're the fucking Heat. And then they say the title of the movie, and then we're off and running. yeah, it's actually a well executed moment. She's there for her, and she's not doing it for anyone else's benefit. She's not doing it for her benefit. She's just doing it out of instinct at this point, because that's how much Mullins has changed, altered, and impacted her. Make sense?
Yes.
Cool. Any last thoughts?
There was one moment in the screenplay that I wish that was in the film. It was kind of there, but it was adapted a little bit quicker. Was when they're staking out the club. In the screenplay, they play three truths and or two truths and a lie, or something like that. Where, you know the game, right? Like you say
Right.
two lies and one truth, and you have to guess which one it is, because Mullins is like, "Oh, I'm intuitive." So she does that. Ashburn says, "I went to Harvard. I went to I was something like that," and then so she says two truths and a lie, and then Mullins is like, "Those are all three lies," and she's like, "No, you're not." And then so then she goes, "You went." So her being intuitive, Mullins kind of reads her like a book, saying like, "You're saying that you're a Harvard graduate, but or like you went to, oh yeah, you wanted to go to Harvard, but you denied it." And it's like, "Oh well, see, you probably put your application for Harvard, though you didn't. You were going to get rejected or something, so you put your you rescinded your application, and so you wouldn't be rejected," or something like that, where it's like all her insecurities are piled on, and it's like, "Oh shit, like you're reading me like a book," and that shows a good character moment for Mullins, because it's like, even though it's in the film and it's like, "Oh yeah, I'm intuitive," and she kind of says something intuitive, it's clearer in the screenplay, and I like that.
Cool. Yeah. I'd actually forgotten about that in the screenplay. That is a cool moment where she's almost like psychic in her intuitiveness, so it may have been a little heavy, but yeah. Awesome. Any last thoughts on the Heat? Fairly successful buddy cop movie featuring two females. Again, I always feel bad, man. And then she followed that up with Ghostbusters, which just got shit on by toxic douchebags for no reason.
I feel it would have been successful if it wasn't attached to the name Ghostbusters, because of a big name, and they're wanting to shit on it.
Right.
But it was a good film. I mean, there was moments, but I mean, it was a good film.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm trying to think of what else she's written to. Yeah, I actually think it's again a fairly successful film. Kind of surprised it hasn't franchised. If there was a spin-off, I mean, they set it up for a sequel where they're both in the same city, and that cat gag at the end is pretty funny too.
I love that cat gag.
He's not your cat, is he? No, and she just shoves him back in the box. Like, God damn it, she's got to drive all the way back to New Jersey to take Pumpkin back. I was actually thinking about that. I love stuff like that. I'll say this: you know what that reminded me of, because I was thinking about this in the screenplay I'm working on. One of my all-time favorite stories. We'll finish on this. Is there's a legendary baseball player named Mickey Mantle, right? And in the early 60s, he was at the tail end of his career. His body was breaking down, but he was still extremely popular. And he got elected. The fans voted him to the All-Star team. So he's going to the All-Star game, which is in Arlington, Texas. And Mickey was from Oklahoma. He was a good old boy. He was a hard-drinking hunter type, right? And so he goes to Arlington for the All-Star game, and his ex-teammate named Billy Martin was the manager of the Rangers, right? Which is in Arlington. The Rangers play in Arlington. So him and Billy Martin hook up, and they're like, "Hey." So Mickey Mantle tells him, he goes, "Hey, I want to go hunting. Can we go hunting?" And Billy Martin's like, "Yeah, sure, let's do this." So anyways, like, actually, I got that back. So Mickey Mantle tells him, "Hey, let's go hunting," and Mickey Mantle goes, "I know a guy who has a ranch around here, and so we can go hunt on this property," right? And so blah blah blah. They decide to go hunting, and Mickey Mantle goes to the guy's ranch. It's like 5 a.m, and he goes to the guy's door and he knocks on the door, And he goes, "Hey, we're gonna go hunting on your property." And the guy says, "Yeah, no problem, but do me a favor. Can you put a cow down for me?" And he's like, "Sure." You know, it's like, da, 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 like a cow broke its leg, and he's like, "I need you to put it down." I was gonna actually take her to get put down, but if you wanted to just shoot it for me, that'd be a cool favor. And so Mickey Mantle was like, "Yeah, no problem." So Mickey Mantle decides he's gonna play a joke on Billy Martin. So he walks back to the truck. There's like 4 people there, but Billy Martin's one of them. And he walks back to the truck. He goes, "This son of a bitch, you know, whatever." He's like, "This fucking cocksucker, this motherfucker." He said, "I can come hunt anytime I want." And now he says, "I can't hunt." And he was like, "Fuck him, man. No one treats Mickey Mantle this way." And he just walks up to the cow and he puts the gun up to the cow's head and he shoots it in the head and kills it. Right. And so it's like, bang. He's like, "Yeah, fuck that guy." And then Mickey Mantle goes, and then he just hears bang, bang, bang. And all these other cows start dropping dead. And Billy Martin's like, "I'm with you, Mick. No one fucks us over like that." And so like, he's like, "Oh shit." So like,
Oh my gosh.
so it's a
It's
famous
fucking hilarious.
it's a famous story where Mickey Mantle ended up having to buy this guy like 5 heads of cattle because Billy Martin got carried away and murdered.
Wow.
And I was like, I've always thought about that story. It's like, that's like the ultimate buddy moment, you know, where you're like, "Oh, fuck with this guy," and then he just goes way too far, you know, like, "I'm with you." So like Mickey Mantle always told that story. He's like, "God damn it, dude! I ended up having to pay like $20,000 to buy this guy like a whole new herd because Billy Martin just started murdering his cows out of range."
Wow, that's a ride or die right there.
Dude, that's yeah. That's a true ride or die moment. So yeah, I was actually thinking about that story watching this movie. She drove all the
That's
way to
funny.
New Jersey to get a cat for her, you know. That's a murder cow moment. So any last thoughts?
I'm all set.
I'm just excited for next week's discussion on Hot Pursuit, the Sofia Vergara Reese Witherspoon movie.
Oh yeah. Wait until we break down Jack and Jill. I'm gonna
Oh,
find that
God.
PDF and send it to you all. That's funny. Cool. 3 hours. It passed pretty quick. Wedding Banquet.
That was
took up a
really
good
fast.
chunk.
Yeah.
Find it valuable. So next week, what are we writing?
I'm doing my midpoint.
Yeah, I'm gonna come back with I've got most of the character bios, like the protagonist antagonist bios. So I just need to do their monologues and then get that done. And I kind of feel a bit more full steam ahead with everything else. So I'm gonna start getting more pages out, or start getting pages out.
Cool. Awesome, gang. Hope this was fun and worthwhile, and discussing films and finding value in them and the screenplays, and think there's worth in it.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Awesome. So I will see you all next week.
Yeah.
Cool.
Take care.
Take care.
See ya.